Welcome, everyone, to The Wizard of Radical Self-Respect. My name is Jared Mello, and I'm the shepherd of Black Sheep. I see Kat and Tim in the comments. How are you? And Kat, how did you know there was going to be a blue wand today? You're taking my magic powers? But yes, it is a blue. It just so happened to be a blue wand day. Now, today's video, though, is going to be a little bit shorter because there's really not as much to go down. No Epstein today, beautiful. That'll be another day. Cover more than one topic. We got to see where this one winds up, and there'll probably be some Epstein maybe later this week. But today we're just going to go over Savannah's video that she posted, and then Ashleigh Banfield and Maureen, they solved a mystery for me. They solved the mystery about where the glove was found, and we finally figured out where the confusion came from, thanks to our girl Maureen. But I did see Dr. G was going over a couple things. I'm not sure how I feel about Dr. G. We'll see. Mac. Welcome, Matt. A new change of name there for Mac again. Got to keep up with them. But again, like I said before, they're running out of new stuff on this case here. To me, the last thing I'm hanging my hat on is the DNA. And even if it's not the best form of DNA, what they discover from that, because they are at risk here of this case kind of going cold, honestly. And then here's the thing about the Epstein case. People are not people aren't going anywhere with it. Like, people talk about it, but then what? There's no consequences. It seems like there needs to be another step, and we're just not seeing that other step. Okay, babe, we'll check it out. The foliage grabber. Follow the foliage and the foliage grabber. You got to love both of them. But if you're here, please remember to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you're not already. I posted a clip of Brian Etten talking to former Undersheriff Rick Castiger. That Rick Castiger, I'll tell you, he's got a little bit of a spice to him. And for all we know, the sheriff does too, right? We don't know. Teresa, how are you this evening? It's going to be a chill Sunday stream. Everyone should check out Savannah Blonde's channel too. She does some music on there. One of her songs did really well on Reddit, she was saying. So definitely check her out. Tim says, Jared, I feel like public going to stop losing interest or start losing interest in case. Yeah, I think we're coming up on that point pretty soon, Tim. I think. Rose, welcome. Bella stopping by. I appreciate you stopping by, Bella. I'm tired today too, so I totally get why you wanted to take the night off too. I get it. I mean, these streams, when I'm talking to you all, it doesn't seem like it's hard. It doesn't seem like it's draining, but it turns into being draining somehow. It's hard to explain. Because granted, okay, I'm on the spectrum and my social battery can be drained. But even so, it doesn't seem like it's that much. It's like, oh, I'm just talking, just watching videos and talking and chatting. But even so, it does drain you. It does drain you. I'm on full case saturation now. That's why I'm hopping over to the new Epstein. Yeah, we'll take a look at that. That's going to be next, I feel like. Because I'm going to watch CoffeeZilla's video about that too. Yeah, my social battery, I can be an outgoing introvert, so I can be really talkative, but I'm one of those people that needs to recharge. And I recharge not by being around people. I recharge by being around nobody and talking to nobody. Now, extroverts are the opposite. They get recharged from being around people, which is a foreign concept to me, let me tell you. Thank you, Livin. Welcome. Montana, welcome. So let's hop over there to what Savannah has to say. And again, I think it's a good place to start to remember that there is definitely a very human element of this case here. And Savannah definitely seems like it's wearing on her, and totally understandably so, right? And so, in lieu of all the egos and the people who want attention and want to solve the case for the glory, there's still a very human element here of an 84-year-old woman, a mother to Savannah, Annie, and Cameron. She's still gone. We have no idea where she is. I mean, as far as we know, there's no clues where she is. Zero. And that's wild. It is. It's just wild. Angela says, Angela, welcome. Have you heard that Nancy was key witness in a fraud case involving big pharmaceutical companies? P.S. Love the show. I have not heard that. I'll have to take a look at that. Maybe Brian. No, he just didn't post a video today. I think there's just nothing else to say. He posted a short, I think. He posted a short. Exactly, roaming ramble. Not to be confused with Brian rambles. But yeah, let's head over here to see what she has to say.
I wanted to come on, and it's been 2 weeks since our mom was taken, and I just wanted to come on and say that we still have hope, and we still believe. And I wanted to say to whoever has her or knows where she is that it's never too late. And you're not lost or alone. And it is never too late to do the right thing. And we are here. And we believe. And we believe in the essential goodness of every human being. And it's never too late. I wanted to come on, and it's been 2 weeks since our mom was taken, and I just wanted to come on and say that we still have hope, and we still believe. And I wanted to say to whoever has her or knows where she is that it's never too late. And you're not lost or alone. And it is never too late to do the right thing. And we are here. And we believe. And we believe in the essential goodness of every human being. And it's never too late.
So basically here she's appealing to the humanity, right, of the people that took her. And then the off chance she's still alive, they're saying, hey, it's never too late to do the right thing. What's the right thing? To let her go or to turn themselves in? That's what she's appealing to here. I mean, I'm still very confused as to what the motive was. Money, revenge, I just don't know. It's just so many things are so confusing to me in this case. It's really wild. But now, the only other video I want to watch tonight is Ashleigh Banfield interviewed our girl Maureen. And Maureen was able to clear up some things I was confused about. And that's what I'm grateful for here. So the story about the glove and where it was found, Maureen cleared it up for me. And I was like, oh, cool. Great. So now we got to the bottom of that and what it probably was.
Hey everyone, I'm Ashleigh Banfield, and this is Drop Dead Serious. It is Saturday, February 14th. It's Valentine's Day. It is also 2 weeks since anyone last saw Nancy Guthrie alive after she was dropped off following a dinner with her family members. And after 14 days, you can imagine that people are upset. They are frustrated.
Actually, did I click the wrong one here? I think I did.
There's such a narrow opening. Hey everyone, I'm Ashleigh Banfield, and this is Drop Dead Serious. It is Saturday, February 14th. It's Valentine's Day. It is also 2 weeks since anyone last saw Nancy Guthrie alive after she was dropped off following a dinner with her family members. And
I didn't click the wrong one. She just confused me by saying it's Valentine's Day.
after 14 days, you can imagine that people are upset. They are frustrated. They have followed every moment. I'm sure you have been following every moment of this case. It is perplexing. It is confounding. How do you just steal an 84-year-old grandmother and get away with it? That's how most people feel, and I'm sure that members of law enforcement feel the same way. Guaranteed they know more than we do, however. On this episode tonight, I've got somebody just fantastic. I mean, God, Maureen O'Connell has always amazed me, right? She looks like she's this pretty delicate little flower, and she's one tough lady. She spent 25 years in the FBI as a special agent, and she knows her shit. I had this incredibly detailed conversation with her about specifics, about facts in this case and specifics, and she weighs in on stuff she hasn't said elsewhere and other people haven't said.
And this is true. Ashleigh is very correct about this. They talk about things that, of all the loose ends the other streams were mentioning, Maureen ties up some of them here. So to me, this is a good way to, I guess, start the week here in this case, although it feels like it's ending the week. But we're going to start the week with this here. So we have a fresh slate moving forward.
Either. Really interesting stuff. Also, did you hear that there is now a signal sniffer that's entered the story? Interesting, because Matt Murphy and I talked several days ago about figuring out some way to.
Did anyone have signal sniffer on their bingo cards for 2026 that we'd be talking about that on the day after Valentine's Day? Signal sniffers. It's like the Pee Wee Herman word of the day.
Get Nancy Guthrie's phone to sort of fly over houses within 30 feet because it might reconnect to her pacemaker. Pacemakers don't die. They don't go away. Even if she's alive or dead, the pacemaker's still going. The signal sniffer apparently is supposed to do that job. I'm going to go into detail about the signal sniffer and one thing that I don't understand about the method that they're using. So it's a bit weird, but I will get to that in a second. Also, big question for you. If you were up with me until 4:00 in the morning last night, thank you. I appreciate the company. But also, I kept thinking to myself, as vehicle after vehicle kept entering the perimeter, dozens of federal and local law enforcement vehicles, SWAT vehicles, forensic vehicles, FBI vehicles, marked, unmarked, sheriff's deputies, all the rest. I kept thinking, there's a lot of manpower. There's one guy who, albeit dangerous, got that. But most people have made a joke of him. They don't know what he's doing. He's kind of a dope. Some people have even said that the way he carries his gun is called a Mexican carry. Never heard that before, but that it is not professional. And this is like how you would respond to Ted Kaczynski, you know? Anyway, I'm going to ask Maureen about that. She's got something interesting to say about it. And then also the sheriff has some new statements. I'm going to read those for you. A little bit of everything, including, you know what? Strap in, pour a drink. It's going to happen a lot. Very interesting. What we saw last night and in Rio Rico is going to happen a lot. He said it's going to happen more than once. So I will read that for you so that you hear it word for word. New York Times had a really interesting story about the man who lived next door to the woman whose house was raided. And it is really fascinating to hear what happened to him and how she became part of his night and everything that transpired. I'm going to tell you about that in a second. Also, the hitman theory. Have you been thinking it? I know a lot of people have been thinking it.
So, Bella, I got to ask you a question then. So, why do you think they're using the signal sniffer? What is their hopes in doing that if you think that the signal sniffer won't be able to pick up on the pacemaker?
Was this guy Was he for hire? Did he show up there because he was paid, because he was hired to do this? A lot of people have said, really looks like he knows the place. Maybe he knows it. Maybe he's familiar. Maybe he was told about it. Going to get into that with Maureen because she's got something to say about that. And Maureen is really interesting in how she weighs in on this whole Florida lab controversy and the whole bitch scrap that everybody's making hay about between the feds and the locals. She's got a very different take on that. You're going to hear that in a second too. And then I dig down on that balaclava. I am not over this balaclava, the ski mask. Everyone's talking about the backpack. There's hundreds of those things sold at Walmart. But who buys a ski mask in Arizona? Who buys a balaclava in Arizona? Okay.
You know what I would think though also? So let's do a little exercise here. You're at Walmart and you see someone buy one of these things. What do you think? I would probably jump straight to it. This is some sort of Halloween costume or something. I wouldn't think directly, oh, they're going to be robbing someone or trying to burglarize somebody. It might cross my mind too. But I mean, how often when you go skiing or snowboarding, how often do people wear these? I mean, Arizona's not that far from Utah and Colorado, and that's where people go skiing and snowboarding a lot. I don't know. I just wouldn't automatically jump to the worst case if I saw that. But what do you think, Chad?
Okay, a couple skiers here and there, but there's something different about that ski mask. And since I'm a skier, I'm going to tell you exactly why I don't believe a lot of skiers buy that, even Arizonans. I'm going to show you what I'm talking about in a minute, but that's coming up in just a second. First, though, I have to just thank you so much for being a part of this podcast. Thank you so incredibly much. This is my full-time job now. I left television after 38 years to do this with you. So your support means the world to me. Could you subscribe? Just, click, click, click. It's really easy. Could you just do me a solid and subscribe? I would so appreciate it. And also, I want to tell you that I partnered with some fantastic sponsors that I personally use and like. Joy and Blokes is one of them. If you have been feeling exhausted, ladies, if you've been anxious or foggy, gaining weight, no matter what you do, and your doctor just blows you off and says, yeah, it's normal for your age. No, we're at the 2-week mark. 2 weeks isn't, believe it or not, it feels like an eternity. And if you're the Guthrie family, it is an eternity. Let's not forget their mother, their grandmother. This is a real person and they are hurting. They are really hurting. Can't imagine. Just imagine if it's yours. Just imagine if it's your mom. But 2 weeks in law enforcement isn't, unless you're dealing with a missing person, which time is of the essence. But solving a crime, which is, I think, what a lot of us are trying to sort of think through, 2 weeks is not a lot of time. And so there's a certain element of patience that we all have to kind of adopt. And I know it is hard, right? Because this is a batshit crazy story. And something crazy happens almost every 5 minutes. But you're going to hear Maureen O'Connell weigh in on that, because she did it for 25 years. A quarter century of experience. She knows a thing or two. Also, we had a federal warrant executed last night. So it wasn't one of these court-approved searches, which was what happened in Rio Rico. No, this was a warrant. And it was got by the feds. I'm going to ask Maureen about the significance of that, because I thought it was unique, especially since the sheriff did not put out the statement as per the request of the Fed.
What's also interesting is Ashleigh's going to ask Maureen about what was the deal with all those vehicles. Why were there so many FBI vehicles, medical examiners, forensics? And Maureen actually has a similar take as me when it comes to that, believe it or not.
That was interesting. 3 people detained, nobody held, nobody arrested. Right. So it kind of went nowhere, which I'm sure as you all woke up was the first thing you did. Right. What was it? You got on your phone. What happened? I was so tired. I couldn't stay awake. Nothing. And I still have a lot of questions about what happened, because I watched as they towed off a silver Range Rover that they had put privacy screens up to take a look in the back. And we all know that privacy screens are usually reserved for bodies. No word about that from the sheriff. But I'll read you his entire statement and everything he said today. But also, Brian Enton said that when he talked to law enforcement, they said while there were no arrests last night, they're still following up, quote, on leads from last night. And one of the things that I learned from so many of these super smart law enforcement people that I've worked with, that I've befriended, that I've stayed in contact with, is that a lead is kind of like a ripple. right? You throw a rock in the water and there's one ripple and then suddenly it's just lots of ripples. One lead can actually ripple into a lot of different leads. So you just imagine with the tens of thousands of leads that have come into the sheriff's department and also to the FBI, every single one of them is looked at. Now multiply them exponentially, because each lead can actually multiply into a rabbit hole. Sometimes it's a good rabbit hole. Sometimes it really does take you to where you want.
And that's probably one of the hardest things that law enforcement has to deal with right now. The thousands of leads and videos they're getting, having to search through them all and try to parse out, okay, is this legit? Or is this something? Or is this completely nothing? That's a lot. That's a lot to have to go through. But the very fact they're even having to do that, what does that also tell you? It tells you that they don't really have much here. And again, the only thing I'm hanging my hat on is maybe the DNA they found in the house can match with somebody, but we'll see.
To go, but that may be the factor of last night when they say that still following up on leads from last night. So let me read you the sheriff's statement that I woke up to this morning. You may have already read it, but I want you to listen to the words specifically because, words matter. Good morning, media partners. Law enforcement activity, : Last night, a federal court-ordered search warrant was executed at a residence near East Orange Grove Road and North First Avenue in connection with the Guthrie case. The warrant was based on a lead we received. No arrests were made. A traffic stop was also conducted. A person was questioned, but no arrests resulted from that incident. There are no further details available at that time. I'm going to pause for a second because that's what pissed me off. It's like, hold it. There was a lot of confusion. There's a guy that was sitting in the back of a sheriff's vehicle being interrogated by what looked like an FBI officer and maybe another sheriff's deputy. He was kind of like obscured, but he looked like he was wearing a white hoodie. He definitely had some facial hair. And there was talk that he might have actually been related to the folks who were pulled out of the house, the woman and the man. Some said mother and son. Some said this might have been another son, but there was some connection between these two stops. But we just don't know what was the connection. Was he the target of all of this? And the questioning happened there and the alibi panned out. I don't.
So again, she's talking about the mother and son that were detained, and then the person at the other traffic stop that was detained. They were questioned, and then they were released. No arrests, no nothing. I mean, I would be curious what the lead was that led them in that direction. Absolutely. That being said, I don't think they're going to tell us.
Continue. And that Range Rover. Answers. Be nice. You treated it like it was the most important thing, right? The privacy shields and the yellow paper over the license plate. I know that was to keep nosy people like me from making connections and finding out who owns the car. But the car was dirty and was photographed a lot before the privacy shields went up so they could open. And I was actually watching. I'm not going to lie. It's the business I'm in. As they were opening the back trunk, I was watching the agents who were standing closest to it because I thought if there's been a body in there for a long time, they're going to look away because there will be a horrendous smell that comes out of the vehicle. I saw one woman do it a little bit. She kind of did that, but it wasn't so pronounced that I thought.
Did you hear what she just said? She said if there was a body in that vehicle, when you open the door, it might really smell, and then the officers around it would have a reaction to it. And I actually said one of the women kind of did, but not really. But that being said, there is no evidence there was a dead body there. They're only speculating based on those sheets that they used to cover it.
Definitely there's a body in there. I didn't get that feeling. And then again, the other issue was the medical examiner's vehicle didn't show up there either. That's not to say that cars haven't been towed with bodies in them before. I've seen it happen. Aaron Hernandez case that happened. It's just not typical. So I can't tell you what the hell happened with that silver Range Rover. I don't know who owns it. I don't know who's not missing it. It's a nice car. Pima County Sheriff's Department and the FBI continue to work together around the clock on this investigation, tracking all leads. Another show of force in the language, because this is important. A lot of news, a lot of ink, a lot of social media on the bitch scrap between the FBI.
So our surgical nurse says that the car would have smelled even before you opened the door if there's a dead body in there. So good to know. Thank you, Bella.
And the locals. I have my own theories on that. I'm going to talk to Maureen about it because she's got some insight too. Very, very wise insight. We remind the public that there's a reward of up to $100,000 for information leading to the location of Nancy Guthrie and or the arrest and conviction of anyone involved in her disappearance. Call TIPS into 1-800-CALL-FBI. 1-800-CALL-FBI or 520-351-4900. Next subheading is briefings/interviews. Kind of know this one by heart. Don't read along with me, right? No interviews, press briefings scheduled at this time. If a significant development occurs, press conference will be announced via email and
So no one might wear a thing like that in Canada, but here's the thing. If it's really that black and white about only people who commit crimes do them, then why are they even being sold? And is everyone being tracked once they buy them? I think there could be other like costumes and other things that people use it for. People use them in movies, right? People use these things in movies to commit crimes in movies.
At Pima Sheriff X account. Don't hold your breath. Haven't had one since a week ago Thursday. Okay. New York Times had an interesting story. They met up with the man who lives beside the woman whose house was raided. And the man gave a very interesting account. He said the sheriff's deputy knocked on his door and he had already been getting a lot of communications from neighbors and friends who were like unable to return to their homes. They were being locked out of the community. They couldn't come home. They were being stopped. And so anybody who was in their homes, they were all getting word around 4:00 in the afternoon, local time yesterday, something's going on because we're barred from entering our own neighborhoods. And y'all who are in there probably aren't allowed to come out of your door. And so the sheriff's deputy shows up at this guy's door. And here's what's weird. He has the woman with him from the house next door and is asking this neighbor, could you look after her while we search her house? Could you be with her? Could you, give her a place to be? Super interesting. So she's not the target, right? Definitely they didn't want to question her. That's my thought, because you're not going to just throw her in the neighbor's house and then go back, do your searchy work. But this was hours and hours long. And this guy said he thought it was just so incredibly bizarre because this is an affluent neighborhood. It's dark. It's quiet. This was so unlike what they'd ever seen before. Said that the neighbors next door had never caused any problems, any issues. And he said that she did not want to talk about what had gone on. The New York Times wanted to interview her. She didn't want to. But the neighbor, when he took this woman back to her house after the search had ended, they found the warrant. The federal warrant was sitting in the home. Because you know how it works, right? First, the cops have to have probable cause. I'm going to talk about the level of probable cause because it's different in this case. And you'll know in a moment why. Super interesting. But first, the cops get the tip or the investigative work leads them to some kind of probable cause. They go to a magistrate or a judge or a night judge or whomever, and they get that signed off. That person has to decide, yeah, you know what? I think the Fourth Amendment, you cleared that. It's not an unreasonable search, right? Fourth Amendment's unreasonable search and seizure. So that cleared them to go in, kind of guns a-blazing. Brian Enton had some great reporting yesterday that they had been doing all this staging and that the helicopter had been flying around. So they were probably making plans and figuring out how they were going to, plan the attack. And the next thing you got to do is you got to have kind of a...
And one thing to address here too, people say, what about all the other missing people or what about the other crimes? Well, here's the thing. All these news companies and even streamers like myself, they're running a business. And unfortunately, when you try to look for kids that are not like famous at all, no one's going to care. People say, oh, you should care. But people's actions speak the loudest of all, and they don't watch. So again, there's a lot of things that people say should and shouldn't be done, but then their actions do something different. So people complain a lot about the kinds of things that get posted online or the kinds of things that get popular. Well, if you're looking for the guilty, you need only look into a mirror a lot of times because it's by what you watch and don't watch that contributes to things getting popular. So, and again, the same applies when people unfollow someone that they don't like all of a sudden because they disagree with one thing. That's how echo chambers happen. And that happens all the time too. So it's just one of those things. It's not fair that that's how life is, but it is just how it is.
List of stuff in that warrant. You can't just say, I just want to go in and look at everything. You got to have an idea of what it is that your investigative work or tip is leading you towards. Yeah. I've seen him wear that balaclava. Want to find balaclava. I'm making that up, but that's kind of the idea here. So you kind of have to have a shopping list in your warrant. So News Nation also spoke with a neighbor of the woman whose house was raided. His name is Peter Mulk. And, Brian Enton talks to everybody, and News Nation was able to, get a few comments from Peter Mulk about what last night was like.
Oh, sorry about that. Thank you very much, sweet Caroline. So true. Yeah, I mean, it is what it is, right? If you're a news station, it's about the business. The undercurrent of needing profit and money influences everything. It just does. And if you can get the overlapping factor of, oh, this can get me it can be good for my business and do something good for the world, then that's a win. That's a win. So thank you, sweet Caroline.
Look.
Unbelievably absurd. It's making everybody nervous. It's just surreal. And we just can't imagine how the family is processing all this. As a neighbor, as a person that lives in the community, we just wanted to resolve, for the positive.
And so what do you make it, how's it feel? There's, 20 cop cars,
Yeah.
a couple SWAT.
Yeah, I live right across the street.
Right across the street.
Yeah, it's weird.
Tell us your thoughts when you saw that going on, maybe, just about trying to process it all. Tell us how you feel about that.
We feel that, they might have gotten a tip. There's been a lot of tips, I'm sure, over the past 2 weeks, but this seems to be a tip that's, could be close. Hopefully it's something that's credible and, it's actual. So hopefully they get somebody, but living right so close to it, I can't imagine that if they get somebody that lives right next to me on my street, that, that even makes sense, to be in this neighborhood, to have all these cops here. There's bomb squad vehicles, a lot of cops, a lot of presence.
Also, I read along with all of you on the Twitter, on the X, how annoyed we all were by this. Like, we waited and waited, for I think 2 hours for the sheriff, who said, first there's going to be a press conference, meet us at this corner. No press conference. We're just going to put out a statement. It will be forthcoming. And then we waited and we waited and we waited into the late hours. And then we got this blurb. It's like, the fuck? It was like the smallest statement of nothing. And I know a couple of you said nothing burger and all the rest, but it was basically like, we can't really talk because the feds asked us not to. Interesting. Now we know it was a federal warrant. Maybe the feds said, you know what, this was our warrant. We'd really like to keep quiet on this one. Let's just not say anything about it. There was just much ado made about the guy in Rio Rico. Didn't go well for us all. So let's just... Also, I've been really, really interested in the ski mask. It's driving me batshit crazy that there's not more talk about it. Everyone's talking about the backpack, which is a freaking dime a dozen, right? I think somebody said 100 of them were sold at a Walmart in Arizona. I don't know which one, in a Tucson Walmart. But the balaclava, you think hundreds of those are sold in Arizona? I got questions. I got questions about balaclavas in general. Who the hell buys these 3-hole masks? Because I ski.
And that's an interesting question too, right? So in Arizona, if those things aren't even being sold, why would a Walmart even carry them? I mean, they're going to let it sit on the shelf for how long? I guess it's not like they would expire, right? So.
Not a lot of people use those. So I'm going to ask Maureen a couple of questions. Number one, how is that not the biggest lead they have? Find the purchasers of any of those fucking balaclavas that have the 3 holes in them, because who buys them in Arizona? Couple skiers, maybe, but I doubt it. That's not a big skiing kind of mask. Trust me. And then I asked her about just tracking that kind of purchase anyway, not just in this case, because who buys those? A lot of people who use them for no good, right? So should we be tracking those kinds of things? Is that too big brothery? Are those tools of crimes, just an obvious tool of crimes?
But you got to think, how many of those things are bought in the area? Was it bought online? Walmart online? I mean, are they looking for a needle in a haystack here? I don't know. With that element of it.
You'll be interested to hear what Maureen has to say about that. Also, Michael Ruiz, who's doing killer reporting on the ground for Fox News Digital, had a really interesting tweet today.
That's a great point there, Bella. Look at this. ICE wears facial coverings, and that they do, don't they? That's a good call, Bella. That's exactly right. They do.
Let me read it. He said, we received a tip from an active duty Miami area police officer who believes that he has identified the holster seen in surveillance video on the belt of a masked suspect at Nancy Guthrie's front door. It is sold at Walmart, just like the backpack. And he holds up a picture, which I'll show you. And then if you want to read his full story about it, just go to foxnews.com, because I thought that was interesting. Nobody's really talked about what holster. Maureen is going to talk about, well, great butt. Wait till you hear her great butt story regarding the holster. I'm also going to talk to her at length about the blood at the front door, because it's been driving me absolutely crazy. Why there are no drag marks or scuffle marks in that blood. It's sort of cleanly dropped, but no one's struggling, or there's no sign of struggle there. So I'm just really fascinated with what her thoughts would be about that, just based on the amount of crime fighting that she has done. Matt Finn, who's been doing some amazing work on Fox News Channel. He's on the ground in Tucson. This is what he tweeted earlier today. Breaking.
So again, this chat, the flock of black sheep, I think we're better than the investigators out there. So now we got, not only do they maybe do this for movies and costumes, but ICE and Antifa might buy those masks as well, because they're wearing masks. So how about that? So those are all the people that might.
County Sheriff Nano says to expect police activity every day and gives more details about last night's massive Guthrie police SWAT activity. Nanos tells Fox the person detained in the traffic stop last night outside Culver's, which we believe involved the gray Range Rover, was a person of interest who was cooperative and later released. Regarding any other detainees, this is the sheriff. I'm guessing anyone at the residence was detained, but that is standard procedure to allow investigators serving a search warrant freedom to conduct their search. I was not at the scene, and I'm sure people were detained, but no one was arrested, and more importantly, no sign of Nancy was found. Looking ahead, another quote from the sheriff here. Every day moving forward, there will be a lot of police activity throughout the community. As to what level of activity that is, depends on what lead they chase and how it develops. These leads start in the command post and move to the field as needed. That is one reason you're seeing activity build up as the day goes on. And that can ultimately lead to a search warrant looking for Nancy and any suspect involved. So there you go. That's the official statements. Again, I keep wondering why the sheriff says I will not be giving one-on-one interviews, and then boop, she sort of does, kind of like blurp stuff out to certain people.
Well, it kind of seems like the sheriff, Ashleigh Banfield, is on the sheriff's list right now. So I doubt he's going to come on her show again.
But night is young. It's 11:23 on Feb 14. Happy Valentine's Day. Maybe there'll be another raid tonight. I don't know. But we're watching. We're always watching. And if there are more developments, you know you're going to get them here, as long as you subscribe, because if you subscribe, you will get the developments. So now I want you to hear this conversation I had with Maureen O'Connell. Gosh, she is so effing smart. Clearly the 25 years, there's nothing lost in her experience, because she is rock solid on so much of this investigative stuff. She's a former FBI special agent. She's the host of the podcast, Best Case, Worst Case with Jim Clemente. And I'm going to play that in 1 second, but a quick note again for my sponsors, because don't forget, independent journalist. So I really appreciate you. And
I think Maureen and Ashleigh go over that, Tim, the fact that local reporting said it was an attempted burglary. I think that's more of a guess, but I think Ashleigh and Maureen do go over that.
Appreciate them. Let's talk about what is really in your makeup, because most of us spend a lot of time worrying about what we eat and what we drink and how we take care of our families, but then we cake our faces with makeup full of chemicals we can't even pronounce. Y'all, your skin is your body's largest organ. Of the fact that It was a federal warrant that was executed last night. It wasn't a state. It wasn't a sheriff's warrant. It wasn't city. It was the feds.
It doesn't really surprise me because this is a task force situation. And in a task force, especially for a big case where there's a lot of moving parts, since we have the FBI there and a huge contingent of FBI agents and federal office agents and officers, we're going to have an AUSA also. And so that United States attorney from that district will be in a position to help with these warrants. Now, the warrants could be put together as it's happening. So if a data point comes up that they think might lead to a warrant, it may be their protocol in place right now to start working on a warrant for this person. Or if they have a list and the first 7 people might be good for something that they're looking at, and they have several data points, they're going to already start with those warrants.
So after the raid, or at least, midway through or late into the night, it came out that the Pima County Sheriff was going to give an update and a statement, and we all waited with bated breath. And then suddenly it was sort of a non-statement at the behest of the FBI. Did that surprise you?
No.
Tell me
because
why.
God love them. The pressers have just been terrible, and they create more questions than answers. You can come out with a succinct statement, which I was actually surprised that at least a statement didn't come out.
And so Maureen just said it, right? God love him, but every time the sheriff talks, he keeps on contradicting a lot of people, right? And then it creates more questions. Now, one could say, who are the rest of us to be entitled to the information anyway? And that's a fair point, right? But like I said yesterday, the media, whether it's regarding politics or law enforcement, they're supposed to be the watchdog of those things. That's the media's purpose. That was what the founding fathers intended for the media to be doing. So yeah, I'm sure they find it annoying, but they're doing their jobs.
But I'd rather have nothing than something that's confusing everyone.
Yeah. It seemed almost terse, and there's been so much made in the media of the acrimony between the locals and the feds. I've been at this rodeo a lot. This story rises in every single story, that there's some sort of butting of heads. And oftentimes I feel like the headlines get away from the actual reality on the ground. What's your read of what things might be like between the Pima County Sheriff's Office and the authorities who are in the local field office, the feds who are in the local field office, and then the folks that have come in from, say, around the country or in DC?
I think they're all getting along great. The worker bees, the people out there doing it. You notice that when all day yesterday, we saw one sheriff's deputy with an FBI agent. That's how we usually do it. And you rely on your partners to whatever the difficult task is at hand, who can do it quicker, who can do it a little bit faster and better.
That's a good point by Maureen. So she's saying the people on the ground, whether it's the local law enforcement and the FBI agents on the ground, she thinks they're getting along fine. Where the disconnect might be at the top, might be with Sheriff Nanos and the people who are leading the charge at the FBI. That could be the issue. So Maureen thinks the people on the ground are actually getting along well and working together well.
And we're all used to doing that. So I think the relationship is good. I think the big hiccup came when someone in the Bureau found out that a glove was sent to the private lab instead of letting the Bureau do it, when in fact there was no glove inside that house. And there's a funny saying that.
All right, so this is the mystery. Maureen said there was no glove in the house. As the sheriff said there was no glove in the house. And they're going to go over where this confusion came from. Pay attention to this, because this is how easy it can happen.
Punctuation matters. And my understanding is it was a difference between a comma and no comma in the writing of that communication. So it's kind of like text messages where you see the funny meme where it's like, wait, you said what? How dare you? And then you realize they didn't mean that at all. They're driving and voice to text mixed it up or whatever. So I think something like that.
Maureen,
I think
you know
that's
what?
happened.
My favorite.
So basically, Maureen just said a comma. Something like a comma being in the wrong place made people misinterpret what was said. So a comma can be the difference between a glove was found inside the house versus a glove was found close by or a couple miles away. Big difference, right? But that's all it takes. That's all it takes for misreports and inaccurate information to get spread.
Favorite line in a movie is from My Cousin Vinny. I shot the sheriff. With inflection, you're asking a question. But when you see it in print, it says I shot the sheriff. And so people just, and that's exactly why I asked you that question, because I really felt as though, you know, every media outlet, large, small, and otherwise, is scrambling for any kind of story they can tell. And I felt like that one just shot out of a cannon and took on a life of its own. But on the ground, I really felt like, sure, there might have been a snipe here and there, but I just don't think it's endemic.
Right. And I've been in these situations a lot. And, you know, I'll be with my sheriff's partner. I've been on task forces or I'll be with the LAPD or the LA County Sheriff's Department or a local municipal. And I'll say something about my boss and they totally agree and vice versa. But we're rolling up our sleeves. I'm not saying that the bosses aren't dedicated, because everyone here, you can feel the dedication in these people and the drive to bring Nancy home. That's what everybody wants. But some people have a different way of how they want things run. The worker bees, we're the ones that were, you know, these guys are out there pushing a black and white. The other people are searching in the desert all night long, all day long in the heat. Some people are down on their hands and knees looking at evidence. Other people have been working 12, 14-hour shifts trying to figure out what vehicles, what devices were in that area at that time. And does that correlate or does it not correlate with the list of people that they're looking at or that they're getting close to, you know? Because if you get 3 or 4 data points on one person, that person's getting shot to the top of the list. And that's a person where that might be enough probable cause to get a warrant. And that's why that early warrant writing, I think, might be what's going on with that Fed warrant you talked about.
Okay, I want to talk probable cause because that's high on my list today. We had a warrant. Well, I'm not sure if we had a warrant. The language was really unusual. It was a court-approved search in Rio Rico. I thought that might have been exigent circumstances, says the U.S. courts say we can break in without a warrant. That's my read on what that might have been. But we had a search down, Rio Rico, and
so before she gets into this part, she's going to talk about the actual search warrant of the house of the mother and the son there. But please remember to like the video if you haven't already. Subscribe to the channel. And I go live every night pretty much. And I talk about current events and true crime. And I use my experience with mental health, addiction, narcissistic abuse, and being on the spectrum. And I apply it to those things. And the best part, there's a great flock of black sheep here too. In the comments.
And we had a search last night. And I wanted to know if probable cause is a little lower when you got an older woman who's missing and doesn't have her meds, as opposed to standard magistrate behavior or late night judge behavior and getting a warrant.
Yes, and an at-risk youth or a baby. So
basically, Ashleigh asked the question I was asking about last night. What does it take for a federal judge to refuse a request like this when it comes to probable cause? And I was saying in a case like this with an 84-year-old woman, it's going to have to be pretty egregious for the federal judge to not sign off on this search warrant, right? And that's what Maureen's saying. Yeah, with the elderly or children, you're going to make sure you do what you can. You're not going to give them a hard time about the probable cause. Now, granted, the citizens might not like that, but the law enforcement and the prosecutors do.
You know, when you have those images of that guy at that door with a gun strapped on him, and when he dragged Nancy out of there, however he got her out of there, she was bleeding. Not only does he have a predisposition and a proclivity to violence, but he proved that he was willing to do anything to get her out of that house. And with that type of information and a couple of data points, this car was in that area and it was also over here. And someone called the tip line and said that guy who was down on the list because he was just in the area, but now
let's play with that, Jennifer. Jennifer says, would they be quick to leave this case if it wasn't the mother of a rich white woman? Well, how about this? If Beyonce's mother or father in America were abducted, do you think that would be a case? Almost certainly. Oprah, same thing. Rihanna, same thing. Now, if it's a nobody, though, here's the thing. If it was a nobody, probably regardless of race, unfortunately, it just wouldn't get much attention. Now, the exceptions would be, and I do see this, if it's an attractive young woman, like a Gabby Petito case, and like that does contribute, right? It does that. It just does. It just helps ratings, and people will get mad about that. They'll say, well, it shouldn't matter what someone looks like. Everyone should get the same attention. But like I said before, life's not fair. Life's not fair, and people just watch more when it's attractive people. It just is what it is.
We hear he has a backpack that looks like that, and someone else called in and said he's got a mustache. Those data points might just get you the warrant.
Yeah. But here's what I didn't understand. As Brian Enton was reporting live from the scene in the perimeter, he's counting dozens of federal and state law enforcement vehicles and dozens of personnel, including bomb squads and SWAT team members and forensics units, et cetera. And I wondered about the show of force, because the guy on the Nest cam, has his gun pointed at his business. It just did not look like a pro. He didn't look like a dangerous
No, but he proved
terrorist.
that he's willing to hurt people.
Did we need that many people in the show of force on executing that warrant? That's what I was wondering.
Well, they put it out on the radio.
Great question by Ashleigh here. Why were there so many people on the scene? And Maureen says they put it on the radio, and let's see what else.
Maybe they put something out along the lines of, hey, if you're in the area, we might need a perimeter. First of all, I would bring in the cavalry just to keep everybody else out of that place, because
okay, that's good to know too. And it's Gabby Petito. I pronounced her last name wrong.
Because that would be a hot number to be there and to witness. And as you saw, they made Brian back up and move out because they have to have a secure perimeter at that time. They don't know what this person is, and for all we know, someone could have said they thought he had explosives or something. I don't know, because the bomb squad rolling out, that had me scratching my head a little bit, because I haven't done that a lot.
That's what surprised me as well. I mean, the bomb squad, both nights. And I thought, well, I'm not sure about last night, but I just sort of thought, look, the guy's dangerous certainly to Mrs. Guthrie, but it didn't feel like he was the, Sheikh Rahman or anybody who's going to bomb the World Trade Center. I didn't feel like he was that level of danger. I felt like,
but if you're demonstrating a complete disregard for human life and well-being of the most innocent, vulnerable members of our society, they're going to have no problem showing that type of behavior toward law enforcement.
And I do like the idea that the perimeter is important, because they have tried to keep so much of this quiet, even towing that Land Rover last night, the Range Rover, and putting.
So let's face it, though, also, let's put ourselves in law enforcement around the area's shoes. Something comes on the radio, hey, we got a couple people that we want to detain, and we're trying to get a barrier to keep the hooligans out and the press out. Everyone and their mother probably goes over there. Let's get on it. Who doesn't want to be there, right? As long as they're technically able to, and they're not abandoning some post of theirs, right? They're all going to go, because why wouldn't they? So that probably explains some of it.
Yellow paper over the license plate so that people like us couldn't trace it and find out who owned that Range Rover.
Did they have a warrant for that Range Rover?
My only thought is yes, because they said in the sheriff's comments today that they had executed, I believe he used the term plural. He said a federal court-ordered search warrant was executed at a residence in connection. Warrant was based on a tip. A traffic stop was also conducted and a person was questioned, but no arrests. Doesn't say anything, though, about the towing of that Range Rover. And then the privacy screens that were going up. In my business, it's usually because there's a body. You don't usually put privacy screens up for evidence, do you?
That's like a death shroud that you put up.
All right, so now they're going to talk about why they put that sheet up to protect what they were doing. Maureen says that's usually like a death shroud, but let's see what they say.
So I'm wondering, wasn't there, what I heard chatter on the scanners about a dead body, but I never heard any follow-up on that.
Well,
Could it
there was
be
there was a hot mess of social media about a suicide and a shooting and all of that, and none of it came to bear, certainly for this story. Whether that ended up not being related to Nancy Guthrie, but at the moment they thought it might be, I can't tell you that because they're not telling us that in the statement today. But I want to ask you about a little bit more about that Florida lab, because you and I talked the other night about that particular Florida lab, and it turned out to be the one that you brought up from Deerfield Beach. What's the name of it again? International DNA International?
or I'm not sure. I'm
Yeah,
not positive.
I think it was DNA International, and they're extraordinary. They've solved, extraordinary crimes. And I think I heard you mention earlier that they specialize in touch DNA. Is that true?
That's what I understand. My experience with that lab is through a series of double homicides called the Colonial Parkway murders.
That's
and
it.
They were able to solve 3 double homicides, so 6 people they've attributed to one person, but he died in 2017, so they can't upload his DNA into CODIS, which I think is strange, but I'm making some phone calls about that.
I feel like they can. I feel like they could exhume that guy.
CODIS is the federal law enforcement's, the FBI's database to cross-examine DNA, for those who don't know.
Get that DNA and then upload it and maybe be able to solve many of the unsolved that may be attributed to him.
Right, because we're looking at, there are people that believe that number may not be 6 people. It may be as high as 15 more.
But this lab is no joke. I mean, they've done remarkable work. And when you mentioned that you think that they specialize in touch DNA, that also keyed for me, because what happened is homicide showed up at Nancy Guthrie's home on Sunday and processed that scene. And obviously, with a missing woman, speed was of the essence here, and they used their regular pipeline and went to that Deerfield Beach lab that they use all the time. FBI's brought in the next day. So it's not as though there was an argument and they rebuffed the FBI. And from what the sheriff said yesterday, and take it for what is word, there's different word on the ground from local FBI, but that they were all okay with it. That the next day the FBI was fine with that. But the fact that they have this savvy on touch DNA, maybe that's exactly what the evidence was that they got. Something that is touch-based.
I think that's exactly what the issue is. I also...
So basically they're saying there's a place that is experts in this kind of touch DNA. Not blood or semen, but this kind of DNA that they got inside the home. So with that in mind, I mean, hey, if there's going to be a chance, to me, that's the chance. But you also have to examine that with how many other people were in the house. How many other people were close? Were there FedEx people, UPS people, Amazon people, delivery people, friends of Nancy, other acquaintances? I mean, we don't know. But that could all be on the Nest Cam, though, too. And I don't know how much more of the Nest Cam they've actually examined. I'm sure they've examined everything they possibly could.
There is a hiccup with it, though, because that lab doesn't have access to CODIS. They don't have access to our databases. So whatever they come up with is going to have to either go back to the sheriff or to the FBI lab to be uploaded into CODIS.
Is that a problem? Is that difficult?
I don't know if it's a problem. I just,
one more leap.
One more.
So did you hear that? That's interesting, too. So the place they sent it to doesn't have CODIS. CODIS is the FBI's DNA database. So whatever they get from that place in Florida, it then has to go to I guess, Quantico, where CODIS is. Just another step.
One more chess move. It's, I like keeping things clean if I can. But I can see his point. If he thinks he can get something back in 24 hours and he thinks that the FBI, because the FBI lab oftentimes is notorious for taking a long time. but not when the president of the United States says you're going to get what you want for this entire investigation. That tells me carte blanche, no red tape, moving forward. Here we go. You know,
I think that took a few days, though. Certainly on Sunday, they didn't know they were in. Everything's in hindsight so easy, but on Sunday they had a missing woman, and they probably knew that she was the mother of a Today Show host. But much more than that, I think we've learned since, and certainly the president weighed in.
So as I
several days
told
later.
you that night on our call, I'm a big believer in treating everyone the same way. And even though everyone's like, look at all the resources. Yeah, there's a lot of resources, but I've worked kidnappings with small children who were very poor, where we poured exactly what you're pouring into this case, into that. Our hearts, our souls, missing everything at home.
And hey, that speaks to good character by Maureen and her team there, right? Regardless of the money or the notoriety or status of the people they're trying to help, they put their all in. Which, that's the mark of integrity, right? If you really want to see someone's integrity, you see what they do and how they act for people that can do nothing for them. And what does that mean in this space? Well, if you're a YouTuber or a streamer, that means someone that's not going to give you a lot of attention, someone that's not going to get a lot of eyeballs on you. The people that are still doing work, even when they're not getting eyeballs, that's the integrity part, right? And so that's what Maureen's talking about with this. But I'm sure what you would see is if there's no eyeballs, then a lot of people just won't do it because there's nothing in it for them.
Staying extra late, showing up early, sleeping in our cars sometimes. I mean, that's the level of dedication that you get when a vulnerable member of the community is
in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm glad you brought that up because I know that, listen, everybody wants Mrs. Guthrie home. I don't think there's anybody out there who doesn't ultimately feel the sadness of this story, not only for Mrs. Guthrie, but her family.
But remember, Jennifer, there's a lot of minorities in the FBI too. There's Black people, Hispanic people in the FBI. So I'm sure that just because someone's Black or Hispanic, they're not going to not do their due diligence.
And everyone's hoping for a resolution where she comes home alive. But as you get in past now, we're at day 14. We're at the 2-week mark tonight where she was last seen. Some of the critics will start to come into the conversation, and the arena is imbued with those who say, wait a minute, why all these resources for this one woman? What about everybody else? But you feel differently. It's just maybe that it's very visible that everyone's watching it happen. But in those other cases, there's just as much dedication. It's just not on the news every night.
I'm not saying that it's 1-to-1 because when you're sending HRT out, that's a whole contingent of tier 1 operators. When
So they're talking about what people were talking about in the chat here, right? What about all the other people that are not rich or famous? What about them?
They don't show up on a plane, you know, with their duffel bag and a backpack. They come loaded for bear.
Yeah.
But for these several children, I mean, we worked a very long time. One of those children was brought home alive after like a week or so and was being kept in a house by a woman and her family, and they were being paid by these drug dealers to take care of the child until all the negotiations were worked out with the ransom. So we did have one situation where, you know, the child came back alive, but it was after several where the children didn't, which just, I mean, when I tell you it tears you apart, you can't imagine what that does to people.
No, I can't.
Let alone the family.
And HRT being the hostage rescue team, yeah?
Yeah.
That's also the big federal unit that's come in on this case from above. So I wanted to ask you about these raids and what you think they are the product of. I wondered if they are the product of tips or if they are the product of the gumshoe work, looking into the purchases of the things that we can see, the backpack, that gun holster, but also, hello, a balaclava in Arizona. How many people have ski masks in Arizona?
Good question. I think it's a combination of everything we talked about. The FBI has the analysts and the software and everything that do all the intake of the information, all the any and all data points that you have on any of these people, even if it's just a first name with no last name or last name with no first name. And we try to build up these profiles as more information comes in, as the other analysts are looking everything up, as we're trying to figure out how many people in this, city own vehicles with this color, with this license plate, with this, and we saw a sticker on the back. I mean, you just can't even imagine the amount of information flying around one of those data centers.
And I also think AI is going to help, right? AI is going to help a lot in this and aggregating so much data and spitting out some analyses, which could take, humans hours and hours and days and weeks and weeks.
Months,
too. Yeah.
AI should help, but those cameras and the data centers that deal with those cameras, those should help also. But a lot of that, it's analog still. It's just not gonna be fast like AI.
So basically, Maureen's saying there's a lot of data to be going through here. So this mask thing that Ashleigh seems to be caught up on, I think Maureen's like, yeah, I don't think that's going to really be what really helps us here.
This is a question that's going to piss off so many people who are listening right now, watching. My husband and I looked up those balaclavas, right? And there's not a lot of the three hole, right? The two eyes and a mouth. Many of the balaclavas you buy these days have just an eye, square across the eyes. So
the over under should have been on how many times will Ashleigh Banfield say balaclava? How do you pronounce it? Balaclavas?
I just kept wondering, what use is that for anybody to purchase? Does anybody track purchases of those kinds of balaclava face coverings? Because it seems to me, certainly in the southern states, there's no need for those other than bad behavior.
Unless they're flying to Utah to ski. I mean, that's something that's not going to be on the list of what we call tripwires. So we have tripwires in the FBI where if someone's buying a lot of fertilizer, we're going to get a notification, all those kind of things, anything that could be.
So Maureen's saying the balaclavas are not going to trigger some sort of tripwire. That's what Maureen says.
Made it into an explosive or things like that. So that's not on the tripwire.
Is that because it's usually petty crime? It's usually B&Es and convenience store holdups and that kind of thing that the balaclavas are bought for?
No, I because there's just legitimate uses for those masks. I think it's kooky. I think you're up to no good, especially if you're buying it around here.
Right? And by the way, I'm a huge skier. I've been skiing since 1969.
Well, you're Canadian. You better be a good skier.
And I'm from Winnipeg, and I can tell you, I almost never see people wearing the 3-hole balaclavas. Almost never in the cold weather.
It's the worst look ever.
Yeah.
Who wants to wear that thing? You look frightening. You're going to scare the children on the slopes.
Because it's mostly for criminals. That's why I just wondered. Right. You can't buy a balaclava
or ICE or Antifa. Don't forget.
In Arizona without having people look askance for a hot minute. It's likely not for skiing, honestly. Not many of them are on the ski hill, but I digress. I want to ask you about
I'm going to make a prediction that holster was not purchased at Walmart or at an Amazon together with those other items. I bet it's old.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. Who was it today who actually found that holster? Lindsay, who is it? Do you know?
It was Fox that was reporting it.
Is it Matt Finn?
No.
I'm trying to find it in my notes. Michael Ruiz. Is it in my notes? Yeah, here it is. Okay. Well, Michael Ruiz actually identified that gun holster. He was able to, they think they have an investigator who was able to identify that gun holster. Will that be helpful as well?
Yes, but it could be very old. It could have belonged to his mother-in-law's great uncle. Who knows?
Could have been stolen too.
Yeah.
So the video.
So before she gets into that, please remember to like the video if you're here. Subscribe to the channel if you're not already. Super chats or super stickers are a great way to get questions answered. And I go live almost every night here and talk about true crime and current events.
Clearly, this is not the only video. I mean, things happened before and after the things that we saw. And so I wonder what you think about the timing and the release strategy of video. Do you think there's another batch that's going to be dropped our way to keep the tips coming in, to keep the public interest on the story?
I don't think it's going to get dropped to the public because that's been nothing but trouble for the case. And the person that we hold most dear in this whole investigation is Nancy, and then her children after that. So they're the only people we really feel we owe information to. But for the sanctity of the case, I wouldn't even do that anymore, because unless it's something that, you know, has a really good picture of his face, I would release that portion.
Or some kind of body behavior. So there was an investigator from Connecticut.
The last thing about the balaclavas, you don't know when it was bought, how old it is, how long the design is, where it was bought from, an Amazon, Walmart. There's so many variables there.
Who spent 25 years as a police officer, and so did his brother. He's also a professional hockey player. So he has lots of skill in body dynamics and also skill in investigations. And he said to me,
body slamming
and injuries. And he said he'd heard somewhere that this guy might have had knee surgery. I don't know. But he said he was very interested to see how the guy leaned over to pick up the shrubbery. He couldn't bend his right leg. He had a straight right leg when he bent down. I don't know that that's so odd for somebody who's younger. They might find that very easy to bend that way, but did it strike you interestingly?
No, I heard everybody saying that. To me, it was more a case of one of two things, or both. He had skinny jeans on over his regular pants or something, because he was wearing, it looked like double of everything else. He had.
Also to note, now that I just thought of it, if you've ever seen the movie Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, Johnny Depp, who plays Hunter S. Thompson, they're doing this in the desert races with quads and dirt bikes. And Johnny Depp's character has one of those balaclavas on, and then goggles over top of it to protect him from all the sand that flies up. What do you know? So if anyone's seeing stuff like that in the desert, that are around races in the desert, that could be another use for them, honestly.
Way too much clothing on. I think we can all agree with that, and gloves and everything. But I also thought he was high. He looked absolutely high to me.
Tell me about that.
He was calm. His face was completely relaxed.
Sweet Caroline, thank you so much. Which support the channel most, memberships or super chats? Probably super chats, or Sweet Caroline, followed by memberships. I think super chats, and then as time goes on, I do think I want to do membership only live streams too. And I meant to count them yesterday, but I forgot. So I need Livin to remind me about that, to count the memberships. But thank you, Sweet Caroline. I do definitely appreciate the super chats.
His eyes were relaxed. His hand motions, everything was slow. He bent over in a weird way. He goes over there and just rips out a handful of foliage and then goes back to the camera. And it just seemed to me that he was high. And I'm not saying that because he was high, he didn't do it, because a lot of people that are high commit crimes. So I don't know. I just thought, and by high, I mean smoking some weed to calm down before he does this dastardly deed.
What do you make of the theory?
Personally speaking, for me, I would not be smoking any weed before I'm doing an abduction or burglary. For me, that would be more likely to give me a panic attack. I mean, or anxiety. But what would someone want to do? Maybe like an opiate. An opiate would maybe calm them down more so that they're not like loopy. Now, you don't want to do it when you're drunk. That'd be stupid too. But again, if you're a psychopath, you're just not getting those kinds of emotional reactions the normal person would. Like that lack of empathy, and plus your cold and calculated nature, you don't feel the things that normal people do. So it's just different for them.
I've been trying to work through this. When he brings that vine that he pulls up from the garden, he's got it tightly grabbed in his fist. As he's, what everyone says, trying to cover the camera, I have a different feeling about it, because there's such a narrow opening between the camera and the bracket that it's on. It's literally about the width of a quarter, and you can't get your fingers in there if you're trying to dismount or disconnect.
Especially when you have two pair of gloves on, yeah.
Right, when you got the thick.
Oh, Thank you very much for this, Just, for the super chat. I appreciate your support. You've been here every night, too, for a while. And I notice the shepherd of black sheep notices. So thank you very much for your support.
Gloves on. I'm wondering if he wasn't holding that with the fists in order to get the vine in between there and yank, if that might not be the motion that we're seeing.
Yeah, but he could very well have been doing that, but it's moronic.
Yeah. Is it ever?
Yeah.
Piece of tape.
Yeah. He's got all that clothing. He doesn't have any string on him or anything or tape or, I mean.
Well, unless the idea is that he absolutely wanted that thing off and thought that he might be able to do it with his own hands and realized it's a little tougher than that. And what my source said was that those cameras were smashed. And I don't know that the vine worked. The camera, well, the video that the authorities gave us stopped at that point. But I suspect that may have continued to a point where he got something bigger and stronger and smashed the camera off its mount instead.
What if he manhandled it? It would have come right off. How many times have you or I tried to pull something and then I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't do it. This thing is stuck. And then my husband just goes up and just manhandles it and it's off and broken, That's
what I thought he was doing at the beginning when his hands were it looked like they were tightening up and gripping at one point. But again, you can't get in between.
That was funny how Maureen said that. Her husband will come up and he'll manhandle it and then he pulls it off and then it's broken.
There with your fingers. It's hard to get between the bracket and the camera. And so I just wondered if maybe he thought he could do it. He realized it's too skinny in there to get your fingers. Maybe the vine didn't work. And then ultimately it was smashed. As my source said, the cameras were smashed.
He may have been high on gabapentin or whatever that is, or oxy, because that makes you do those kind of slow, dumb moves,
Interesting. Talk to me about the blood drops. I keep going over scenarios in my head and none of them works given the fact that there's no smears, there's no sign of struggle in the blood drops, there's no footprints, there's no drag marks with the blood. And I'm trying to figure out what possibly could have happened where Nancy is dropping blood in those patterns.
Great question by Ashleigh Banfield here. I'm very curious Maureen's answer because I don't think I've ever heard Maureen's answer to this.
Without any struggle at all around her.
If she was being dragged out by her with his hands under her arms and she's facing away from him and he's dragging her and all of a sudden when they get out the door with the jumbling around, her head turns, everything that would be in her mouth and her nose would just go to the ground right there. Yeah. But then we might see drag marks. I don't know, but that rug, that mat that's in front of the door, that absolutely should be taken and should be, it's a little late now, but it should have been taken to the lab and it should have been examined. And I understand that their initial thought was it was a missing person, and they get a lot of these calls, and that's a lot of the work that they do is looking for people that have wandered away from their homes. So, we can beat them up all we want, but I would have taken that rug for sure.
Oh
to
my
see
God.
what's on that. Could you have drag marks on that rug? You would have been able to see.
And Michael Ruiz said that there were glass fragments down below, which might support the theory that the camera was actually smashed. He said that that's what he spotted, which leads me to the number of people who have been in that vestibule on those tiles. Pizza delivery guy, flower deliveries have come there. Pool guys have shown up, multiple detectives, several reporters. So yeah, I guess you're right. The rug now, that welcome mat, is it useless? Is some of that forensic evidence now so compromised it's not even useful for analysis, let alone the prosecution?
I mean, it would be hard to get a lot of that stuff admitted, but I wouldn't say it's useless because drag marks are very specific and leave very distinctive marks. And
I mean, honestly, it's shocking that they didn't do something with this mat already. Honestly.
If there are drag marks, like two heels consistent with someone her weight, it might be a good clue.
The other thing is that my mom is 87 and she
You're lucky.
Very lucky. And she can get cut very, very easily. Her skin's very thin. She can bang up against a table and be bleeding. And it's a lot, right? Because she's blood thinners as well. And I wondered if maybe Mrs. Guthrie had a small injury and it did produce that sort of amount of blood, but that she was literally being marched. I mean, because you're not going to really argue with the gun. Certainly not at 84. You're not going to argue with a gun. You can be pretty compliant.
If she hit her arm inside the house, they'd have blood inside the house also. Might not be a lot, but based on what we saw outside, it should have been more than it is. That's why I think that it was, whatever it was contained in her mouth and sinuses maybe. And when the head turned for whatever reason, it all just poured out into that location. People are also talking about the blood stopping at the end of that stair, or moving on a little bit forward, as we saw in the last couple of days. They were saying that the droplets actually
did continue.
Continued for a little bit, but that could just be a matter of putting a towel or a shirt or pulling something out of that backpack that was packed with God knows what, and placing that over her face so she stops bleeding. Because the last thing any kidnapper wants is to bring a person who's bleeding into the vehicle, whatever the vehicle is.
Yeah,
but that's why I think that there was a tarp or something in that backpack. And I think that guy was probably going to end up being hired by somebody to go in and just drag her out and bring her over here or whatever.
I had my thoughts about that being a hired gun, that guy.
An unsophisticated one, but we got to give him credit. He got her,
Yeah. My source said that there is blood inside the house as well as outside the house.
Okay.
Yeah.
And maybe she did hurt herself.
And the other thing I can't get past is my source said that the back door was wide open. Some people say wide open for unlocked. Some people say wide open for standing wide open. And I don't know the difference. Yeah. But that's where I'm trying to sort of get my head around how this crime was committed. I almost wondered if Nancy Guthrie was, out cold asleep at 1:47 a.m. and that dingle happens on your phone. There's motion at your front door. And she reaches over and looks at it right at the point where all of the foliage is dangling in front of the camera. And she's wondering, is that an animal? What is that? Puts the phone down and goes to the front door to open it and take a look. And maybe that's how he got in.
I would say no.
No?
I mean, seriously. The first thing, if I were 85 years old and I heard someone at my door, first thing I would call is the police or my daughter or son-in-law if I were her.
But if you thought it was an animal, because you saw the dangling phone.
No, Ashleigh Banfield. No, I agree with Maureen here.
If it was an animal, I wouldn't care if it was a horse. I'm not opening that door.
I agree with you, but she was different. I read about her decisions to get the Ring or the Nest cameras, and said that it was less about security and more being able to see animals in the night. Wildlife.
I don't know. The only reason that guy went to the front.
I don't think so, Ashleigh Banfield. I think you're not going to go down at 1:45 in the morning to see the animals by Nest Cam.
Door was to disable that camera. I think his marching orders were disable the camera, because there's no way that guy was getting into that front door. That's a gated door or screen door, what we call a burglar door. Yeah. And behind it is a very thick wooden, like Spanish style door. I've kicked down doors in my life. I've been with teams that can breach just about anything. Those are two very difficult doors to get in. So I think he was just disabling the camera, and then he went around the back of the house, and that was whoever hired him or however he got there.
And again, considering that back door was left open, I think there was multiple people in on it. There was someone at the front, maybe someone came through the back, and I think they were maybe hired by someone, but then by who? Right? By who?
Yeah. Goes to the back because that door would be a lot easier to break in. But it begs the question, if they kick that door in, is there a chance that it wouldn't show signs of forced entry? Maybe. I don't know. I don't think so. But it hasn't been clarified to us whether or not it was forced entry. But
my source said forced entry. And when the sheriff was asked about that, he said, I'm not confirming or denying that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So my guess is he went in through the back. I don't know, going into people's houses in the middle of the night is a very high risk situation because you can't see anything.
Yeah.
I mean, they may have a bag of trash by the door that you're going to trip over. I mean, it's not an easy situation. So he must have had intel or been in there before or something. That's my thought. So he goes in the back and then he gets her and whatever,
out
but
the
he's in there
front.
for 41 minutes. And then he goes to the front because the car's out in front.
And I keep wondering, is the car out front? Because if you're going to try to stay out of sight, you got a nice place to tuck in at that garage at the back. And there's that little pathway from the garage through to the back door. So if your plan is to take someone out live or dead, that is a better and easier way to do it without anybody seeing who might be driving by.
Okay, but we didn't see the tire impressions that would support that. So I would say that the car was in the front, in the circle driveway with its lights off, that it got up to the house or they drove by a little bit earlier. They didn't have their phones with them or had them completely disabled, because even a flip phone would ping off of something. But then I was also talking to a friend of mine that was a national asset on the CAS team for the FBI, the cell phone analysis or computer analysis team. And he was saying that area is.
Thank you very much for this, Mike. My two favorite blondes, very smart. Yeah, Maureen's probably my favorite. Thank you, Mike.
So hard to get in and out of. And I heard a law enforcement officer describe the roads as almost like spaghetti noodles going all over the place. It's very hard to figure out where you're going. So did they go old fashioned and use a compass or what? Or did they turn another phone on when they got lost a couple blocks away? I don't know.
Did they know their way?
Or did they know their way that well?
I thought about what you just said. If somebody was using Waze to find their direction to Nancy Guthrie's house at that particular time of night, that would be traceable, wouldn't it? The FBI could get that.
Absolutely would, because it's pinging off everything. That would absolutely be.
So anybody who had to use any kind of directional help, that they could get that. And would they be getting that? They think of that, right? They would be looking for that now, wouldn't they?
Oh, absolutely, 100%. These forensic teams that the Bureau has, they're just magicians. I'm not kidding. They're just unbelievable. They think of everything.
Speaking of that, Brian Enton reported something so interesting tonight. He said that a signal sniffer, I'd never heard of that. It was sent in and was affixed to one of the skids.
That was our word of the day from the beginning. Remember that? She kept us on edge until 59:37, but she said it twice in 30 seconds.
On the helicopter that was circling overhead while he was doing live shots yesterday afternoon. And Matt Murphy, homicide prosecutor from California, had said to me, I would like to see them take Nancy Guthrie's phone and move it all around the neighborhood because it will reconnect with her pacemaker. And we looked it up and it's actually 10 to 30 feet. Within 10 to 30 feet, the Bluetooth would reconnect. And so this apparently might have been the effort with the signal sniffer to detect Nancy's pacemaker. I mean, talk about magician work.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like just a fantastic tool. I would love to see it in action. But again, you've got to be so close. You'd have to grid that place out in little 10-foot wide, squares, and you're only about 10 or 12, maybe 20 feet off the ground. That's hard with all those big cacti and everything else. Even the shrubs are taller than that, some of them.
I mean, if you're flying a helo 30 feet above street level, you are nearly chopping off the antennae of the car. It's right. It's really close to be 30 feet above street level, isn't it?
Yeah, but it also shows the level of dedication and the risks that people are willing to take to bring this woman home to her family. I mean, I cannot imagine what Savannah and her brother Cameron and her sister Annie are going through. I just can't. I'm surprised we don't find them wandering out in the desert by themselves looking for her,
Yeah, I can't. None of us can put ourselves in their shoes. And I often try to think of it, if this were my mother, I don't know what I'd be doing. I can't even imagine it. And I don't even want to go there with my mind. It's just so terrible to think of it. Last thing I want to ask you about is the very white roof. Neighbors had pointed out that Mrs. Guthrie's roof was very, very white and in the desert. There's only one reason it would be really white: a hell of a rainstorm that cleaned it off from the desert dust, or a recent painting. And so I can only assume that any paint contractor has been looked at, and not just recently, because I heard from another analyst that sometimes these guys will go back years. Like, they'll think of people they've worked on a year ago, and they'll target their victims from work they did a year or two prior.
Yeah, well, you don't want to target someone whose house you were just at 3 weeks ago, because then you're at the top of the list. You know, if it takes them that long to get down there. But I didn't know that it was that much whiter than every other roof. But it was clean. It did look very good. I know a lot of people, like, you know, when you're in a fire zone, you always keep your roof clean. That was part of the problem here in California. There was just dried up foliage all over the place. And they say that you've got to remove that. And I have an uncle who's actually 84, who goes up on his roof to clean his roof and gutters out. Oh my God, when we find it. But he was an iron worker for, you know.
You can't change them. You can't change an iron worker. I said last question and I lied, because I actually have two more. Matt Murphy again used the phrase DNA is a dirty word, and it means DNA, depending on the source, can be remarkable or can be, you know, very average. Touch DNA found in, say, the front hall of Nancy Guthrie's home could be the FedEx guy whose touch DNA was on a package that came into her home and dropped on the floor.
Or on the kitchen counter where the grocery delivery guy puts the groceries every single time, right? But
semen and blood, those kinds of things are incredible sources of DNA. But that's why he says DNA is a dirty word. So everybody who's so excited about hearing about this, so, you know, this mystery source of DNA, put it in context.
Right. Or someone else's saliva on her pillowcase, something like that. It's, you know, the whole thing we're doing with these search warrants is trying to tie a person to something within that house. And whenever, to walk you through it, like when we're doing a dope warrant or a narcotics warrant, we would go in and we would find, let's say, a bunch of methamphetamine and everything that goes along with it. We're trying to figure out a way. We interview people. Whose room is this? Who stays in this room? Who else does he allow in this room? You know, we try to really tie down the fact that this person was right there. And so those are the things that go through a law enforcement officer's mind when they're walking through houses. And that's that. The other thing I wanted to say to you was, you know, when those officers first showed up, it's going to be very interesting for me to hear how everyone was acting and reacting. According to what we've heard so far, everything they said and did was very appropriate. But they're leading that whole walkthrough. They're saying, well, is your mother's car keys? Are her car keys here? Oh, yes, she keeps her car keys over here. And this is where that is. And every day, this is her iPad. And her iPad always comes with her when she goes here and there, and then she reads it at night, every night in bed. And they, you know, so it's like a tour guide through the house of where everything is, where it should be. Is there anything missing? That's going to take a while. And so there was a lot of movement in that regard, but that could be overcome by a good forensics team.
Okay, last question. Honestly, last question. We are only 14 days in, and you know, these kinds of cases aren't like television. They're not solved in an hour. In the grand scheme of things, 14 days, people are screaming from the rooftop, how could we not have found Nancy Guthrie or solved this case yet? But from a law enforcement officer's point of view, put that in perspective.
Well, we have to be patient. And I'm saying that as a person who has no patience when it comes to this stuff. I never had patience. I have to always slow myself down. Like I got so excited the other night when they arrested or they detained that one person. And then last night, I just couldn't go to sleep. You know, I couldn't sleep because
you and me both.
Oh, please bring her home. Wouldn't that be a miracle? And then someone said there was an ME truck there, which turned out not to be the case. And that, you know, this is a roller coaster. And a lot of big investigations are, but this one is one for the ages. And I have never, ever seen, experienced, worked, or even heard of a case like this before.
So That would explain a lot of our confusion, right? This is a one-of-a-kind case. Maureen, decades of experience, and she's never seen something like this. So that goes to tell you. It also goes to show you the fact that they're even using a signal sniffer, that they're grasping at straws here. I don't think they have that many good leads, and I don't think they even think the DNA in the house is likely to lead to something. I don't know, though. It doesn't seem like it's going good.
That's saying a lot.
So we have to have patience. We have to have patience and show grace to these people that are.
And that's true too, though. We got to show patience and grace. Thank you very much for this, Mike. Heard today to get DNA, it only takes 7 cells versus 30,000 cells before. Well, hey, that is encouraging, isn't it? Thank you for that, Mike. I appreciate you. Also, everyone like the video and subscribe to the channel if you're not already.
Are working so hard and pouring everything into this. I mean, there's 14 days. I'm not saying anyone is complaining about being tired or working too hard, but I mean, it's 14 days of being away from your family, missing your kids' games, everything, which we understand that's the job, and we do it with an open heart. But it does take a toll on you, especially with these roller coaster up and downs, the emotional up and downs, and cortisol dumps, and then and then peak and dump, and it's no wonder we like a glass of wine or a glass of whiskey after work sometimes,
And to God.
Mm-hmm.
Maureen, thank you so much. So there's where we leave it.
I'd like to have a whiskey with Maureen at a point after a long stream. Hey, Maureen, let's get a double shot of whiskey on the rocks. How about it, huh? All right. This will be the last video. Oh my goodness, 56 minutes. Ugh.
Hey guys, thanks so much for checking out my show. I really, really appreciate it. Please click to subscribe. Of course, I'm still in Arizona. It is Sunday. A lot of big developments I'm going to get to in this episode. This is Nancy Guthrie's house. Obviously, this is kind of where I've been stationed. But we got a new statement from the FBI talking about DNA that was found on one of the gloves that was recovered. And this could really be significant, especially in light of the DNA that we know was also found inside Nancy's home. So I have a DNA expert who I'm going to talk to, who is going to join me in a couple of minutes and explain the significance of this and why this does mean we could be getting closer to a suspect. Also, you guys remember the SWAT raid Friday night that I was at. I went back out to the house where the raid happened. Then a couple days later, I find a lot of times when you go back to places a couple days later, you can see if people want to talk then when things sort of simmer down. So I'll show you what that was like. Really nice neighborhood, by the way. So I'll take you back to the house. And then also more drama with the Pima County Sheriff. In this episode, I have an interview with a sergeant from the Pima County Sheriff's Office, who is also the union president, who is very concerned about the way the investigation has been handled. He's concerned about a lack of experience with the detectives on the case. And he explains to me what he thinks should be done differently and also what is being said within the department. It's the first time I've been able to interview him, and he is a sergeant with the department right now. And he was able to speak freely because he's got the protections because he is the union president. And then
So Brian seems to be finding a lot of people that are not very happy with the sheriff, whether it is Under Sheriff Rick Kassiger or this person here.
Lastly, I'm going to get into the signal sniffer. Remember, I told you guys about that. That is this device that I've now found out came from the FBI that they attached to the helicopter that can actually sense Nancy's pacemaker. Everything new I've learned about that also coming up in this episode of Brian Enton Investigates. Hey guys, all right, so I want to go over.
So Bella has said that's not true. Our surgical nurse in the chat says no, they're not going to be able to find that via the signal sniffer. So you know.
For the latest with you on the newest development with the FBI statement involving new DNA on the glove. And first, the statement's a little confusing, so I'm going to tell you what I make of it in a second. But first, let me just read you this new statement from an FBI spokesperson. It says,
well, before we read that, Sparky, thank you very much for the super chat. I don't think they have the right backpack. Look at the straps. They are different than the brand they said. Which one are you referring to? The one they were talking about on the Ashleigh Banfield stream? But thank you, Sparky. I'll let you know what I think about that.
The gloves found approximately 2 miles from the Guthrie residence in a field near the side of the road were packaged up by the Pima County Sheriff's Office and sent overnight on 2/12, and they arrived at their private lab in Florida on 2/13. The FBI received preliminary results yesterday on 2/14 and are awaiting quality control and official confirmation today before putting unknown male profile into CODIS, the national database unique to the Bureau. This process typically takes 24 hours from when the Bureau receives DNA. Investigators collected approximately 16 gloves in various areas near the house. Most of them were searchers' gloves that they discarded in various areas when they searched the vicinity. The one with the DNA profile.
It is so absurd that all of these searchers are discarding their gloves like that. Why are they doing that? Don't you think they would know better than to do that?
File recovered is different and appears to match the glove of the subject in the surveillance video. The FBI has and will continue to provide assistance on whatever timeline is provided to us. So the most important line here that I see is the one with the DNA profile recovered is different and appears to match the glove on the subject in the surveillance video. So there is one of the gloves that they have found that is different because they say it actually matches the glove that we see in the surveillance video at the front of Nancy Guthrie's home. And it has a DNA profile on it that they are interested in and that they are going to put into CODIS. So that is pretty significant. And remember, a lot of people are saying, well, how do they know exactly if the glove matches based on that video that we've just seen from the front door? They could have more video that we just don't know about. Nancy had other cameras, and they may only be releasing publicly the video from the front camera, but they very well may have been able to get video from the other Google Nest cameras that Nancy had. I am told she may have had one more, and maybe that also picked up video of the suspect. I don't know, but if it did, that could be another way that they're able to get a close look.
So imagine that. She would have another Nest cam that we just haven't heard anything about. And that's the tough part about following this true crime. When there's so much they don't tell you, you're just not playing with a full deck. And you're not going to be able to help as much as you could because you don't know all the information. And granted, they're going to leave things out for the benefit of the investigation. But again, we wouldn't know one way or the other, though, would we?
At the glove. So this is significant. The other thing that stood out to me is when they said that some of the other gloves that they found were from searchers that had discarded them in various areas. I mean, that just kind of surprised me. You would think that the search crews would not be just discarding their gloves outside, especially since it appears most of the searchers have been either deputies or FBI agents. And I will say I've seen some photos of some of the law enforcement out searching with these black gloves just like hanging out of their back pocket. And I noticed it because I thought, gosh, those could just like fall out of their back pocket. And then would someone pick that up and think that that was a glove connected to the case? So that part kind of stood out to me. But really the main message here is that they have a glove with the DNA profile recovered, and that glove appears to match the gloves of the subject in the surveillance video. Later in this episode, you'll hear me. I talked to a sergeant with
appears to match the subject in the surveillance video. So appearances can be deceiving, but maybe that's a good sign. But again, how many different kinds of gloves are there?
Pima County Sheriff's Office, who actually happens to also be the union president, which is why he was allowed to talk to me. But he'll explain he's skeptical of this glove actually matching back to the suspect, just because he says there really are a lot of these gloves around. There's a lot of homeless people around. He says there's a lot of people who wear these gloves for different work.
What was I just saying? It's almost like he read my mind.
That they do. So he was skeptical, but you'll hear why he says that a little later in the episode. I also want to remind you, when it comes to DNA, there was another big development over the last couple of days. The sheriff said that they found DNA in Nancy Guthrie's home, which is back there behind me, that does not connect back to Nancy Guthrie and does not connect back to anyone in her, circle of people that come to the house. So that to me is almost more significant than the DNA found on the glove, because that really could be the kidnapper's DNA. The bottom line is they're getting DNA now in from different places, not to mention, remember the search warrant they did where they likely swabbed people for DNA there too. So the bottom line is they're getting DNA in now from different places. And this is when you start to see a case come together from the experts that I've spoken to and from the cases that I've covered. This is when DNA experts can really go to work and they can start comparing different pieces of DNA that came in and start trying to make connections. So I get the sense that things might really start heating up over the next couple of days based on some of this new information that's coming out. So again, I'm going to get to my DNA expert here in a minute, but I wanted to get through some of the other big headlines.
So it'll be interesting to see what the DNA expert has to say. Thank you, Mike. Gloves are for chemicals, sulfuric acid, next road. Sometimes, yeah. Thank you, Mike.
Lines for you, and she'll actually explain how significant this is. Something else. So remember Friday night, I was at the SWAT operation that happened where they went into the house. They pulled a man and a woman out who I'm told were mother and son. And then they also pulled someone over close by as part of the same operation. And we're told there were no arrests made. It was all connected to the Nancy Guthrie investigation. But I'm told by sources not to just discount all of this, that there's still very much an investigation happening behind the scenes, that they served this federal search warrant, and that, they're still processing evidence. So I went back to the neighborhood today. I hadn't had a chance to go back since I was there when it was dark out, and I wanted to see what it looked like in the daylight. And I also wanted to go up to the door and see if anyone was home. So take a look at this. So this is my first time back in the neighborhood where the SWAT activity was on Friday night. I was here, it was obviously dark, and then I got so distracted with all the other developments of the weekend. But this is what the neighborhood looks like. It's a pretty nice neighborhood. It's interesting because again, it was so dark when I was out here. It's interesting to see it all in the daylight. This is the house here that the SWAT activity happened at, and it's pretty quiet around. I'm gonna go to the door and see if anybody is home at the house.
I think that was the mat that they didn't take too, that she walked up upon.
Doesn't look like anybody's answering. I think other reporters have already been here. Not sure if anyone's home, although there is a car. Oh, hi, we'll be right there, it said. I don't think anyone's coming. I did. I saw someone in the window. Hello? Hello? There was a woman that just opened the blind just for a second. But yeah, I don't think they're coming out. Like I said, I think some other reporters have been here, and it looked like a kind of an older woman that opened the curtain just for a second. There's this car that was in an accident in the driveway. But yeah, so this is the neighborhood. It's a pretty nice neighborhood. Kind of reminds me of Nancy Guthrie's neighborhood a little bit. It's about 2 miles away, but the houses are much, much closer together, and they're out closer to the road. In Nancy's neighborhood, there's obviously...
So that was definitely not Nancy Guthrie's house.
See a lot more like shrubbery and cactuses in the front. So I'll go back to that house again. I find just with my reporting that sometimes when things cool down and all the other reporters leave, and if I kind of going to forget about something, that's the best time to kind of swoop in and try to talk to people. So I'm going to check out the house again and just keep an eye on that whole situation, because again, while there were no arrests, I'm told that there's still activity happening behind the scenes. Something else I wanted to update you guys on, if you follow me on Twitter,
let's see. Oh, Sweet Caroline, thank you so much for this. I appreciate your support. And while you're here, remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel if you're not already. I'm live almost every night to talk about true crime and current events. And there's a great flock of black sheep here too, of course.
Talked about this signal sniffer, which I confirmed that I actually have video of this helicopter. We saw it last week. It was the Pima County Sheriff's Office helicopter that was hovering very, very low over Nancy Guthrie's house, and then hovering low over the side yard and the backyard and just different areas around the house. But it was peculiar because I haven't seen search and rescue helicopters hover in one place that low for extended period of times. Like it would stay in one spot for like 3 minutes and then move, but again, very, very low. And I am told that there was a piece of technology on the chopper that was sent in from the FBI called a signal sniffer. And it's a new kind of technology. It's pretty top secret in many ways. And they attach it to a skid of the helicopter, and it could actually sense Nancy Guthrie's pacemaker. Again, I'm told it's an imperfect science and it's a new technology.
And this is what Bella in the chat says won't be able to happen.
And it has to hover low and it has to stay in one place. That's why the helicopter was.
And Bella is a surgical nurse who would know.
Was just like not moving around a ton. But they believe that there's the possibility that it could actually pick up on Nancy Guthrie's pacemaker. It also, by the way, picks up on other things. AirPods, I'm told, smart washers and dryers, all of those things. So it becomes a little complicated trying to narrow it down. But it's interesting. It is a technology that they have used in the past. And I confirmed that with one of my sources on the ground. And then News Nation reporter Libby Dean, who's my friend in DC, also confirmed it with her FBI source that the FBI did send that technology in and that it has been used, which is just interesting because I've never heard of something like that before. And it's just kind of fascinating that they could try to detect Nancy's pacemaker. And hopefully, when I saw them using it, it was over a week ago. So I don't know if they've used it again, but it's kind of a neat piece of technology that they're using.
Right. So if the transmitter and the Wi-Fi needs to be connected, how on earth would the transmitter and Wi-Fi be connected to Nancy and her pacemaker at this point?
Using in this investigation. I want to go now, though, to Cece Moore, who is a really just a famous DNA expert. She's worked on a lot of big cases, and I want to get her take on this latest information that we got from the FBI regarding the DNA on the glove and also the DNA in Nancy Guthrie's house. I'm joined now by Cece Moore. It's nice to see you, Cece.
Nice to see you.
I think it's quiet out here. Hopefully I'm outside Nancy Guthrie's house, so sometimes it gets a little noisy out here, but I think it'll be okay. Just a lot of people in the crime community know you, obviously, but just for people who don't know you, tell me a little bit about your background.
Well, I'm one of the early pioneers of genetic genealogy, and then that transition into using it for law enforcement purposes. And I am the chief genetic genealogist at Parabon Nanolabs. My small team and I have helped law enforcement solve over 365 cases now. So I think we've really proven the power of investigative genetic genealogy.
For sure. So I'm glad you're the perfect person for me to talk to about these.
So they're saying the pacemaker can be tracked with a sniffer, but the people in the medical field are saying, no, it doesn't work that way. It has to be connected to a Wi-Fi and a transmitter.
Latest developments with Nancy Guthrie. The first thing I wanted to ask you is this new information that came out from the FBI about this glove that was found 2 miles from Nancy Guthrie's house that they found some DNA on, and they're going to put into CODIS, I guess, after they finalize the testing. What do you make of that? What does that mean?
It's interesting to me that they've agreed to put it into CODIS because that usually means that they feel fairly confident about it. They have very strict guidelines about what DNA is allowed in that database. So that leads me to believe that they have a reasonable belief that it could be from the crime scene. However, being 2 miles away, of course, I would obviously use great caution in coming to conclusions about who the suspect is just based on that alone. We've had a lot of cases where we have analyzed things like gloves and like other items in or near crime scenes. And of course, when you're doing that, it really requires that there is a lot more caution used because it very well could be an innocent person.
Yeah, and a lot of people use those black gloves for different jobs. And like you said, the fact that it's 2 miles away. The sheriff also said that they found DNA in Nancy's house that is not, that doesn't connect back to Nancy and doesn't connect to anyone really within her circle. Because apparently they've swabbed, you know, like the workers that have gone in and out and the family members and stuff. That to me, is that significant?
To me, that's much more significant because we know that's tied to the crime scene. Of course, it still doesn't guarantee that it is the suspect. DNA can last a long time depending on what the form is of that DNA. I've worked cases where we analyzed a drop of blood and it ended up being someone who'd lived in the house 2 years earlier. And of course, we know Nancy has been there for many years, decades. So she should have a pretty good idea. I mean, her family should have a pretty good idea about who has been in and out there. So that helps a lot. I am very optimistic about that part of it, much more so than the glove. And I think that if they really do have that alien DNA there, that DNA that they are not able to tie to any known person, that could very well be the answer to this case.
And I'm told that with some of these people that they've been questioning, you know, they've done some search warrants over the last week, that they are swabbing them also for DNA.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense.
How does that work? So what, then they will go and compare that to what they found in the house, or how does that work behind the scenes?
Right. So that is using the traditional law enforcement DNA analysis that they have used for decades in cases like this. So that's just a straight profile, one-to-one comparison. Do any of those individuals match any of, and does the DNA profile from any of those persons of interest match any of the DNA that was found in the house? If they did, that's obviously huge. Even if it matched that glove, that could be really telling, right? Because that's unlikely to be a coincidence then. That's not something that they would need to use genetic genealogy for. So that is just the traditional type of testing and comparisons.
How long does it take to get results for something like that? Like if they go and do a search warrant and swab someone, how quickly could they know if it connects back to the DNA on the glove or the DNA in the house?
Well, that could be very quick because there's such a thing as rapid DNA now. And I'm sure they are using it in this case since it is so timely. And with those, you can create those law enforcement profiles, the type of DNA that's entered into the CODIS database, very quickly, almost immediately. And so that's something that they should have results on extremely quickly.
And when you say quickly, is it like hours even?
Yes, hours.
Okay, so I'm just thinking because this latest raid was on Friday night. It's now, when we're doing this interview, it's Sunday. There have still been no arrests. So maybe they've already gotten the results by this point.
They may have. It just depends what technology they're using.
So you remember what Maureen said, though, too. The other database the FBI has, whatever they send to the Florida place, they have to send it separately to the CODIS thing so the FBI can run things through their database, too, because that's different.
Typically, it would take, I'd say, overnight, a full day if they're using the traditional crime scene analysis. But if they're using one of those rapid DNA analysis machines, which I would be very surprised if they weren't, that is very, very quick. So they would already have answers to some of those questions, I imagine.
If they've sent everything so far to this lab in Florida, which the sheriff's department uses, if they do a swab of someone here, do they then have to send it to that lab? Or can they do something here where they just compare it?
They could do something there if they have the rapid DNA machine there. So the private lab, the outside lab, is going to be most useful when it comes to creating a SNP profile, which is what we use for genetic genealogy. Many labs, including crime labs, the FBI, many others, are able to create that traditional STR profile, that short tandem repeat profile. That's what law enforcement has used for decades. That is what they use to charge someone with a crime and eventually convict somebody with a crime. And so there's a wide capability to do that. So they could have sent it to their own crime lab there in Arizona. They could have sent it to the FBI for that, or they could also have DNA Labs International in Florida working on that part of the case. That's a much more quick process as compared to creating the SNP profile and trying to perform genetic genealogy on it.
Yeah, when I think of genetic genealogy, I think of the Koberger case, which I think is the first time that a lot of people had ever heard of that. Is it essentially where they go? Well, tell me could they use it in a case like this?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I've been waiting for that to happen, just hoping that there would be DNA found that was not tied to any of the known individuals from the home, because that will solve the case if nothing else does. It's just a matter of time then. If they have that DNA, that person who left that DNA will be identified.
So the stranger's DNA in the house, they could figure out who that person is, even if
absolutely, yes.
Just they could come up with it almost out of nowhere. Even if none of these others. Yeah,
it's not out of nowhere, but it is a highly reliable method of reverse engineering somebody's identity just from their DNA. So if someone leaves their DNA behind at a crime scene, then they absolutely can and eventually will be identified through investigative genetic genealogy. What is going to determine how long that takes is what population group that person is from. So if their ancestry is from Latin America and they have recent immigrant ancestors.
So to me, like I said, this is the only chance that the case has right now, is that DNA gets matched to somebody.
It'll be much more difficult to identify that individual, so it could take a lot longer. We have a lot of those Hispanic cases, and they tend to...
And it's also only if the DNA is not from someone random that was by the house too, because that wouldn't do any good either.
Take weeks, months, or years compared to somebody who has deep roots in the United States and primarily Northwest European ancestry.
Is that because if you are Hispanic and your family just came here recently, you're not in as many databases? You don't have distant relatives in as many databases?
Exactly. Now, they could get lucky and there could be a close relative in the genetic genealogy databases, but that's really unlikely. And that's because despite the fact that over 50 million people have taken direct consumer DNA tests, for law enforcement cases, we are limited to the 2 or 3 smallest databases, which is less than 2 million people. And I'm hearing a lot of misconceptions out there. People are saying they can use Ancestry, they can use 23andMe. That is not true. Ancestry, 23andMe, and MyHeritage, the 3 largest consumer DNA databases, have barred law enforcement's use. And they're...
Oh, how about that? So people were thinking 23andMe, Ancestry, and whatever the third one was can be helped in this case, but apparently not, because those companies have barred law enforcement from using it. Why would those companies do that? Probably because they know if law enforcement is using them, who's going to willingly send them their DNA now?
There are 2 well-known databases, GEDmatch and Family Tree DNA, that have agreed to work with law enforcement. And then there's a new nonprofit called DNA Justice that's much smaller, but it can also be used. And so those are the ones that they will have to work in unless they can serve a successful warrant on the larger databases. Now, if I was Savannah Guthrie and her family, I would be begging management at Ancestry, 23andMe, and MyHeritage to allow the genetic genealogy profile to be compared in there, because it would be a much more straightforward and quicker identification that way. But so far, they've been very, very resistant to that, even though studies have shown that 91% of the public is in favor of using genetic genealogy to identify this type of criminal.
I'm so glad you explained that, because I didn't know that.
So again, the ones she's saying they're not allowed to use it are the 3 biggest. But that doesn't mean the others are not allowed at all. There's others that are just not the 3 biggest.
Just assumed that you had access to all of them. I didn't know
I wish.
that.
We'd be solving thousands and thousands and thousands of cases. Every day we would be solving a case, because if, for instance, you're adopted now and you want to find your biological family, you can compare against 50 million plus profiles, and you can almost always find that family quite quickly. And I used to work adoption cases back when we had a tiny database. So working law enforcement cases now is like stepping back to, say, 2014, trying to find somebody's biological family. And that is just because of the size of the databases. So because we're working in GEDmatch, where you have to not only be in the database, but opt into law enforcement matching, that is maybe 600,000, 700,000.
So you have to opt in to law enforcement matching too. This is another hoop to jump through. Cartels don't sign up for 23andMe. I wouldn't think so. But other family members might, right? That's the thing. But thank you, Mike.
1,000 people. And then family tree DNA, there is maybe 1.2 million or so in that database. They don't release their exact number. So, some of those are the same people. So it's really under 2 million people. And you've got to get a little lucky, right? You've got to hope that there are close enough relatives in there for you to be able to find their common ancestors. And so we're working with second, third, fourth, fifth cousins and beyond the vast majority of the time. Occasionally, you will get a close relative, just luck. So it's really going to depend on luck and population group as far as how long genetic genealogy would take to identify this unknown individual.
2 questions. Do the bigger companies that you were talking about that don't let you use their database, have there been warrants where they make exceptions?
No, I do not believe there has been, based on some very good inside sources I have. But I know that they are ready to serve them in a case that has, high priority. For instance, if Charlie Kirk's killer had not been identified so quickly, or the person who tried to assassinate President Trump, those would have been the type of cases where I think it's very likely the FBI would have gone ahead and served that warrant on the commercial companies, Ancestry, 23andMe.
Interesting.
In a case like this, we'll
better let Candace Owens know about that. They might want to do that anyway, because a lot of people think he isn't the one who did it.
I don't know, but I think that this is going to happen one of these days. And it's going to be a huge knockdown, drag out fight between law enforcement and the courts and these very powerful deep pocket consumer DNA testing companies.
Do you think that they have started ancestral DNA testing? I don't know how you phrase it with this case. Do you think it's already started?
Absolutely. I think they are doing it in parallel, like they did in the Kohberger case, where there's enough DNA where they can split that basically, and they can create the STR profile, that traditional profile from some of the DNA, and then will at the same time be creating that SNP profile with another portion of the DNA. And even in Kohberger's case, for instance, they were able to do that, and it was just transfer DNA or touch DNA, right? It couldn't have been a lot. So it just depends on what they found in Nancy's home, how much they have, but we need such a tiny, tiny amount to create that genetic genealogy profile that I feel very confident that they are doing that. And I've worked with.
And the question I would have for her is, what if it's someone else, like a pizza delivery driver, a FedEx person, a UPS person, an Amazon person? How do you know like who's who?
DNA Labs International in Florida, the company that is doing this. And they are very good at extracting DNA from evidence. They have done that on a lot of my successful cases, because that's not something that Parabon does. We send that out. And so I have full confidence in them. I do not at all think it was devastating that it was sent to them. I trust them. And I am sure they are already working towards creating that SNP profile, if not already completed it, and uploading it to those databases where they need to compare it against the people that have allowed us to do that.
And again, if they want to do it with the federal one from the FBI, they have to send it separately, according to Maureen O'Connell.
And I know you said it's hard to say an exact time, but like what is the range of time you think it would take for them to get results to find a second, third, fourth cousin of whoever did this?
Well, it takes a little while just to get the comparisons back. So once you upload that SNP profile to GEDmatch and Family Tree DNA, it can take a day or two, or sometimes even longer at Family Tree DNA, to get that list of people who share DNA with that unknown DNA contributor. So I doubt that they have it yet, but it might be very, very close to being compared at GEDmatch. If they were able to create that, say, yesterday, and upload it, it would be undergoing those comparisons right now. They might have their match list, as early as today or tomorrow for that database. Now, if there are significant enough matches there, and when I say matches, it's very different than what most people are used to with law enforcement cases. Matches has traditionally been.
And again, maybe some of this has already went down anyway, and they've gotten some of this stuff, and maybe that's where that mother and son and the person at the traffic stop, maybe that's how they got caught up in this. Maybe there was DNA there. And then maybe they stopped them and said, oh, it was just a DoorDash, or oh, they were just a UPS or FedEx driver or Amazon driver, maybe.
An exact match, right? You're looking for that person in the CODIS database, their DNA. Or if your state allows familial searching, then you're looking for someone who's a very close relative in the law enforcement databases. Only some states allow that. But that can only detect a first-degree relative. You need a parent, child, or a full sibling. They also can do a Y chromosome search. That's a little bit more complex. But that is very, very different than in genetic genealogy databases. When we say a match, that is a partial match. That is someone who typically will share just a little bit of their DNA. It might be less than 1% of their DNA. And you get a long list. So everybody that puts their DNA in one of those databases will have hundreds or thousands of matches, depending on their population group. We're usually looking at the top dozen, 2 dozen, 3 dozen matches, and then trying to figure out how they're related to all of those people. They might be third cousins, meaning they share great-great-grandparents. So we've got to figure out which set of their great-great-grandparents. And we do that by looking for patterns in the data, overlaps, triangulations. Who's this one person or set of siblings that is related to all of these people sharing DNA with the unknown suspect? So it can take a long time. The fastest I've ever been able to do it once I got my DNA list from GEDmatch was 30 minutes. And then I have some cases I've been working on for 7 years. So
wow.
Population.
So it's hard to say.
Could that possibly be why the sheriff said this case could take years? Maybe. Remember he said that?
It really is. But
yeah.
In a high priority active case like this, I'm sure they're going to throw everything at it they can, all the resources they can. DNA Labs International has a really good chief genetic genealogist there that I have a lot of confidence in. And so if she's not already working on it, I'm sure she will be soon. And this is the type of case that you push to the top of the pile, and that's because it's active, right? The vast majority of the cases that we're working are cold cases, and they're still important, but public safety is not at risk as much as when you're working an active case like this or Koberger, for instance. They need to stop these people in their tracks.
So interesting. Is there anything else, Cece, you think with this case is important? I mean, and we don't know, obviously, all the details, but the fact that they have DNA from inside the house, the glove, there's probably other things that we don't know about. From a DNA perspective, do you think they're making progress just based on what you know from the outside?
Well, it's always hard to know what's going on behind the scenes. I'm sometimes so frustrated when I'm working on a case and I see the commentary that's out there in the public, because I know on those cases what's happening, and it's often very different than what the public or even the media is speculating. So I hesitate to speculate on that. But I have, as I said, a lot of confidence that they are moving this forward. The agency already had a relationship with DNA Labs International and a contract, which means they've been successful in the past. They trust them. And as I said, I have full trust as well. I think anyone making negative comments like that, it's really just competitive posturing. We don't need that in this case. We want Nancy found, we want this person identified. It doesn't matter.
Competitive posturing. So she's basically referring to former Undersheriff Rick Castiger. He was kind of doing some competitive posturing with Sheriff Nanos.
Which company does it, or which lab does it? Which, of course, I'd love to work the case, right? But I don't really care as long as somebody skilled is doing it. And they did not make a mistake, in my opinion, sending that to DNA Labs International. They can bring in the FBI genetic genealogy team too, if it ends up being a really difficult case, just like they did in the Koberger case, right? It was started at the private lab. It was transferred to the FBI investigative genetic genealogy team, and they were the ones who made that identification of Brian. And that could happen in this case too. If it's taking too long for the private lab, then they can certainly bring in the FBI genetic genealogy team, and they have resources that we don't have. And so sometimes, especially in these immigrant cases, Latin American cases, we have had the FBI come in and take over cases, and they were able to identify that person using resources we didn't have, like border crossings, right? Immigration records, things that we wouldn't typically be able to access because.
Did you hear that, Raymond? That might help with that part, maybe.
As genetic genealogists outside the government, we are just working with public records only. We don't have special law enforcement access. We just have access to what everyone else has. Actually less, since we can't use the big databases like you could if you were researching your own family.
Wow, really interesting. Cece, I appreciate you explaining it to me. Thank you for taking the time. I appreciate Cece for taking the time to talk to me and explaining some of this DNA stuff to me, because it can be this is where things get really complicated and scientific. But as you heard her say, this is also when cases come together, and we're starting to see DNA evidence really appear in this Nancy Guthrie case. So hopefully this will help move things along. I also want you to hear my interview that I just did with Sergeant Aaron Cross, who is a Pima County Sheriff's Office sergeant. And I've made a lot of sources on the ground here, but it's difficult talking to people within the department on camera because they can get in big trouble for speaking. What's interesting about Sergeant Cross is he is also the union president, so he has protections and can speak more freely. He's not on the inside of the Nancy Guthrie investigation at all, so he can't.
Interesting. Another person that might talk some stuff. Thank you, sweet Caroline. You're teaching me too well, Jared. Now I'm wondering if this woman has an agenda. What, the previous one? I mean, she's a fan of that kind of genealogical work, but other than that, I don't know what her agenda would be. I have to think about it. But thank you, sweet Caroline, for the support. If you're here, remember to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you're not already.
Speak about what's happening from the inside of the investigation, but he has a ton of expertise when it comes to this area. He's been with the sheriff's office for almost 20 years. And he also is able to talk about, and openly, which is difficult here because people are nervous to talk badly about the sheriff who are still working there. But he can talk about concerns that the deputies have about the sheriff, about the way the investigation has been handled. And why he thinks the FBI should have been brought in sooner. So listen to my conversation with Sergeant Cross. The first thing I wanted to ask you about was just this new FBI statement that I showed you. First of all, apparently there's a lot of gloves that have been found.
Yeah.
What do you make of that? I mean, I guess these gloves are used for all sorts of purposes, it seems.
It is pretty common. It could be from investigators. It could also be, I mean, we have a large amount of homeless that live and camp in the area. We also have, we've experienced a lot of nighttime car break-ins in this area as well. So, I mean, it could be from any one of those things. Hopefully it's related to the Guthrie kidnapping or incident, and they're able to get some DNA out of it, and it breaks the case open. But I understand it was found a couple miles away.
I kind of think it's a long shot, but we'll see. The thing I'm curious in is the DNA found in the home.
Hopefully, as he's driving away, he throws his gloves out the window. Maybe we'll get a lucky break, but there's a lot of possibilities.
That's what it would be, a lucky break for sure. Gone, thank you so much for this. This is another great interview from Brian with a sergeant who speaks similarly about the egomaniac sheriff. Brian is collecting them between former undersheriff Rick Castiger and now this guy. What's interesting to note here is this, though. It seems like the former FBI agent, Jennifer Koffendorfer, is nicer to the sheriff than the actual people that are local law enforcement or have been. Now, Maureen said that we learn less from the press conferences. But outside of that, she didn't really say too much bad about Sheriff Nanos. But interesting to note. But thank you, Gone. I appreciate you.
It just seems like that would be a dumb thing to do, though. I mean, if you're the suspect,
Yeah.
why wouldn't you bury them or hold on to them?
Yeah, it seems very unusual. He seemed to be very prepared and very careful, at least on the video that was released, and so it would seem very out of character for what we're able to see. But hopefully we'll get lucky.
And you are a sergeant with the Pima County Sheriff's Office and
Yes,
also the union president.
Yes, sir.
So you're able to talk to us about some of these issues with the department because you're protected.
Correct.
By which is why we haven't really been able to talk to anyone else within the.
Yeah, I can speak on matters of public concern.
Yeah.
And have some protections from that.
Do you ever get?
Thank you very much for this classic 10 Glover. Didn't they find the 2 Mile glove after video? What do you mean after video? I think they found it days ago now. But that's not, I don't hold too much hope about that one. But thank you, though.
Nervous about retaliation?
All the time. I'm sure I'll be drug in to answer questions about this very interview.
Okay. So. Since you have your pulse, I mean, how many deputies did you say are in your union?
So we have a little over 300 out of the about 396 detectives and deputies in the department.
So almost everybody.
Yes, sir.
So what is the feeling right now within the department? I mean, you guys have the eyes of the world on you.
Yeah, it's tough. The deputies, they haven't been impacted as much. The detectives, though, they're working, I mean, some of them are working 8 days straight. Some of them have put in 70, 80-hour weeks for the last couple of weeks. So they're doing everything possible to try and solve this crime.
Well, say that again, Tim. They connected glove DNA to a suspect? Where did you hear that, Tim? Are you sure you're not using the word suspect here incorrectly? Just someone that's not Nancy or someone in the house? Close to Nancy?
They're working very hard, sacrificing a lot of time with their families, and they're doing everything they can. But it's definitely taken a toll a little bit. You can tell when you speak with them. There's a little bit of burnout. I get that sense. They haven't vocalized that to me, but you can tell it's been a lot. And working 80 hours a week, 70 hours a week, that's a tall order.
And a lot of pressure. I mean, everybody wants to find Nancy,
Certainly, yeah. The whole, it feels like the whole world, or at least the nation, that their eyes are on us. And so there's a lot of pressure internally as well as externally to try and solve this quickly.
Is it true, and I've just heard this from some people around the sheriff's office, that the homicide team is pretty inexperienced right now?
They're pretty new, and that goes for really all the departments. So we have 96 detectives. 45 of them are detective ones, meaning they're pretty new. Inside the unit, I think the person that has the most experience inside that unit has 3 years in homicide. And then some of them are more experienced detectives. They just haven't been in homicide. So there's been a lot of turnover. Another example is that our deputies, we have 195 deputies in patrol. 101 are on probation, meaning they have less than a year. We've experienced several waves of exodus of deputies going to other agencies or retiring early to go work somewhere else. So we're feeling the consequences of that, both on the detective side and in patrol.
Yeah, that's kind of alarming when you think about a case this complicated.
Very.
And we know the sheriff's office is still technically in charge. You'd think there'd be people with decades of experience.
Yes. And if this case happened 10 years ago, we would have a lot more experience to handle it. However, I mean, like I said, we only have 96 detectives compared to something like the FBI. They could bring thousands of investigators that they could pull from across the country. So we're a medium-sized department, and of course there are limitations that come with that.
Have there been frustrations on the inside about the way this has been handled?
A little bit. They vocalized some of that to me. A lot of it is just some of the decision-making from the top makes them look incompetent, and a lot of those decisions weren't theirs. And so I agree with.
So what the need to be, what decisions in particular is what you need to know now. Well, what decisions are you talking about that made them look incompetent?
With one of Sheriff Nanos's versions was that we gave up the scene probably a little too early, and perhaps.
Well, there you answered my question.
We could have kept that locked down, maybe with the permission of the family, could have put up crime scene.
No, that one I do agree with. That's the one big one for sure, right? They shouldn't have opened up the crime scene so early.
Tape after the search warrant was concluded, just with the understanding, hey, we're probably going to have to come back out here. Is it okay if we keep people out and see if the family would have agreed with that and put up that security to keep people away, just to maintain that crime scene as pristine as possible.
What about this relationship with the FBI? Because we've heard from FBI sources that it hasn't been good.
Yeah.
You know, I even heard a couple nights ago there was some critical information that wasn't shared with Ebola that they just didn't tell the FBI about.
Yeah.
And then, you know, this whole issue with the lab.
Yeah.
It's going to Florida, whereas the FBI is, why isn't some of this stuff going to Quantico?
Yeah.
Where does that stem from?
So my opinion is that this comes from 2016. I think when Sheriff Nanos was investigated, when he was interim sheriff back then, I think that investigation caused a lot of the icy relationship that we see today. He holds grudges, and took that as a shot, and I think that he hasn't forgotten it. And I think that's driving some of the decision making that's going on right now.
Do you think the relationship
Sounds like he talked to former Under Sheriff Rick the other day, because Rick said the same exact thing.
is getting better at all, though? Because when we went out to the search warrant, I guess that was on Friday night. You know, the FBI was there for that.
Yeah.
It was and it was your SWAT team, but then it was an FBI search warrant, federal search warrant. I mean, do you think they're trying to mend that now, or what's your sense?
If there's any efforts to mend the fences between them, it's only because of public pressure for him to do so. But I think that this case, what worries me is I'm worried that this case has become an ego case for him, that this is our chance to one-up the FBI or to show that we're as good as the FBI.
I'll tell you what, it's interesting these guys are speaking so freely against Sheriff Nanos here too. These guys used to be co-workers, and I wonder, it's like, okay, is Nanos just as guilty here? Or is this guy and Under Sheriff Rick, are maybe they the same way as him? And so maybe that's why they all don't get along. I don't know. Couldn't tell you. We don't know what happened, right? We don't know why they both say this.
And I'm not sure that should be driving the decision making. We have very capable, hardworking detectives. However, it's like I said before, we're a medium-sized agency. We just simply don't have the manpower, the assets, the funding that something like the FBI could bring to bear.
What happened with that? I've heard some rumblings about the search plane and the pilot, I think, or do you know much about that situation?
Yes, sir. It was a pilot / TFD, a tactical flight deputy. So our plane has two people in it. It's the pilot and the person behind him who is operating the high definition cameras, the FLIR, all that. And so there was a pilot / TFD who was normally assigned to work that day with a pilot. However, he was transferred the week before, I believe on January 25th. And he was transferred back to patrol, and as a result of that, he was not replaced. And so as a result of that, the plane was not able to be used immediately. From what I understand from people who worked that day, the helicopter was initially used because there was a pilot at the hangar and a helicopter pilot, so they jumped in the helicopter and responded. And that has some benefit. When you fly a helicopter around a missing person, oftentimes people, they go out of their house to go, what's going on? Why is their helicopter flying so low around the neighborhood? And so when you get people out of their houses, sometimes they'll see a disoriented elderly person or someone in need, a small child, and they'll call 911. However, eventually they called the TFD out that day, and then they flew back to the hangar, I understand, and then got the plane out of the hangar and got it overhead. But that took 2 or 3 hours from what I understand.
So did the sheriff have an issue? You said the person was transferred out.
Yes, sir.
Do you know why?
There's a minor demeanor complaints with the pilot. I think he'd been around 17 years, and there's some demeanor complaints in behavior with his interactions with some other people inside the unit that, in my opinion, could have been handled a little differently. He received informal discipline and then was transferred. I think that informal discipline and perhaps a special observation probation would have been more appropriate and would have kept that asset, which is that plane is the most valuable law enforcement asset in Southern Arizona. And if it moved to Phoenix, it would be the most valuable asset in Phoenix. It's that good.
Yeah, I've seen it. It has the monitors in the back. It's
fantastic.
It's impressive. I saw some pictures.
It's fantastic.
Of it. Yeah.
And all the local agencies around us, whenever it's available, they want to use it for any of their cases. It's extremely valuable. And so I feel like handling that a little bit differently would have kept that plane ready and addressed the problem with the employee. But that decision was made differently.
So that deputy is a deputy, yeah?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, he had 17 years of experience
flying
with that kind of work.
Yes, sir.
And he hasn't been able to work this case?
Correct. And he started as a TFD that we then made into a pilot. So he had 17 years in the air unit, I should clarify.
Okay.
But he'd been a long-time pilot, was a long-time TFD, and was very good at his job.
So he could be helpful right now?
Yes. That day, they would have been up quickly, and perhaps the searchers, because when this first came out, we initially believed that it was an elderly person who may have bumped their head or something and walked away. And so having that plane up with its capabilities would have allowed the search and rescue team to, in my opinion, more quickly realize that she's not in the area. And maybe we need to start looking somewhere else and thinking about this differently, especially considering the blood drops.
Tell me a little bit about, I read about a no confidence vote for the sheriff.
Yes, sir.
When was that?
That was, if my memory serves me correctly, it was in 2024, early 2024, I believe. And we took an anonymous no confidence vote or confidence vote, and it returned, except for one vote, it was unanimous no confidence in Sheriff Nanos.
Listen to this guy, basically smearing him. So he's smearing Sheriff Nanos. Undersheriff from yesterday smearing Sheriff Nanos. So it's like, I wonder why. I wonder why that's happening. Did both of these guys get burned by him? Or maybe they're correct. Or maybe this no confidence vote says, actually, no one liked them except for one person. And it's like, really? So if no one liked him except for one person, what would he still be doing there? Makes you wonder, right? Makes you wonder a lot of things. But again, when they both talk like this, it doesn't really give you faith in the case, does it? Like, oh yeah, by the way, no one there actually has any confidence in Sheriff Nanos. But good luck finding Nancy Guthrie.
And that was done to kind of try and get the word out to the public, to the voting public in Pima County, that we've got some real issues in this department.
And that's yeah. I mean, so everyone except for one person in the union said no confidence.
Yes, sir. And my opinion is he probably didn't understand the vote and maybe made a mistake.
So, what are the? I mean, so why does it seem? So why don't they like him? What I mean,
well, I think former Chief Deputy Castigar kind of gave you some insight into the issues going on with Sheriff Nanos. He has an ego that's difficult to describe without sounding hyperbolic. And it drives a lot of his decision making. He's very retaliatory. Their favorite version of retaliation is through transfers, which has impacted nearly every unit in this department and decreased our overall readiness, in my opinion. Nearly every unit, the experience and expertise that was there was transferred out for whatever reason, and there are real impacts to that, and it lowered morale, and so. There was a lot of hope that in the election in 2024 that we would have a change at leadership. And when that didn't come to pass, very close, but when it didn't come to pass, that's when we started seeing these mass exodus.
So it makes you wonder, though, who was he running against? So who was Sheriff Nanos running against? And wouldn't you want to bet it was probably someone that this guy and the undersheriff from the other day, they probably wanted that guy to win. And he didn't. And so now maybe they're still upset about it. And maybe it was one of these guys that ran, I don't know.
Of deputies and detectives.
How close was it?
471 votes.
So he lost by 400. He won by 471 votes.
Yeah, 471, 481, less than 500.
Okay.
It was so close it had to have a mandatory recall per the Arizona state law.
And you mentioned the transfers, and you said it was like discipline by transfer. Is that what happened to you?
Oh, yes, sir. So when I became president in 2023 of our union, I initially decided, hey, let's take a morale poll. And so we did a morale poll. It came back pretty low, and it came back with some comments. And I thought that those comments would be beneficial to someone in a position of leadership. So I quietly compiled them on a professional letter and sent them to Sheriff Nanos, just put it in his basket, and he could have thrown it away. However, he took exception to that and responded by transferring me to a position to hurt my family.
You know, I try to think if I was in that position, would I take that as being like passive aggressive? Like, oh, by the way, all these people hate you. Have a good day. So it's like, I don't know, as a man, wouldn't you want to talk to another man? Like, hey, what's going on here? And at least that way you've said something, as opposed to like the little, oh, by the way, everyone hates you. See you later.
That was confirmed to me later by former Chief Deputy Castigar.
What do you mean to hurt your family?
So I was on midnights because I had small children and my wife worked during the day. They knew that. And about 7 months before, one of his chiefs threatened me to move me off midnights. And I explicitly reminded them that I'm on midnights for my family. But when I sent that letter, they responded by transferring me to a day shift so that I would not have that time with my children.
And did you get transferred to like an office job at that time, or?
Yes, sir.
So you don't even, how much experience do you have?
This will be my 26th year.
So again, one might say this is this guy's motive to talk badly about the sheriff, right? He's mad. He got pushed off of midnights. Now, does that mean everything he's saying is wrong? No, I wouldn't say that. But it does give you maybe an idea of what some of his motivation is.
I am the second most senior sergeant in the department.
But you're not out on the street?
No. He has me taking calls, phone reports. So if your garden hose gets stolen and you want to make a phone report, I'm handling those currently.
Is that feel demeaning? I mean, with all the experience you have?
I'm the first and only sergeant in the history of our department ever working that position. It's normally reserved for injured deputies so they can still work while they're recovering from their injuries.
So I've covered, I've interviewed unions before, like with a lot of different things. And a lot of times the unions don't like the boss.
Yes, sir.
Or it's about pay.
And granted, this is where egos come into play too. Here Brian Etten is. His videos are getting 500,000 to 1 million views a day. And some people just can't help themselves. I want to get in front of the camera. I'm going to bad talk the person that screwed me over. So here's this, Sheriff Nanos. So again, egos are everywhere, right? And this kind of thing can happen. I would think personally, though, if I'm a leader of a task force like this, you kind of want a unified front. And Maureen did emphasize that at least the people on the ground have a unified front. But isn't it interesting, right? It seems like the former FBI agents, they're more together on this than these guys. These guys seem to be, they have an axe to grind. Maureen and Jennifer Koffendorfer are like, well, they actually are kind of defending his decisions. Interesting to note, isn't it?
Yes.
So that's not uncommon, but is this different, do you think, than other places where, because the unions always seem to have some kind of issue. You know what I mean?
Yes, sir. Yeah, I agree. And oftentimes you do hear of unions. They're always lobbying for increased pay. And certainly we lobby for that as well. But no one came to the Pima County Sheriff's Department because they were going to get paid the most. However, I have a theory that you can either pay your employees poorly or treat them poorly, but you can't do both and expect them to stick around. And that's where we're at. And our pushback against leadership inside this department, I believe, is a large reason why we've grown so quickly. Like I said, we started in 2023 from nothing, and we're already now representing nearly the entire commission side of the department.
The other thing I found covering sheriff's offices around the country is, sheriffs have a lot of power. I mean, they're elected.
Certainly.
So sometimes, or many times, the deputies love the sheriff. It's like the opposite of what you're saying.
Yes.
And even though maybe they don't get paid as much as they should or as much as they want, like the sheriffs have their back.
Yes.
And it's different than working for a police department where there's a city council and they almost, the sheriff really protects the deputies.
Yes, sir.
But I guess that's not the case here.
No, and it's pretty unusual.
But it is around here. Right? I mean, I've interviewed some other sheriffs. It seems like other sheriffs are really liked.
Yes, sir. And the counties that are next to us, their sheriffs are very popular. Pinal County is a great example. They're directly to our north, and their deputies adore their sheriff, from my understanding. Ours is different because of how he runs the department and the retaliation that they do to the deputies that speak up or even perceived to be against Nanos, or even he heard them say something against him. Because of that, we had couple dozen of them protest with me against the sheriff during the last race. And I am unaware of any other instance where deputies protested against their sheriff for an election race. But it happened last time. But it wasn't without risk and fear. A lot of those guys did it while wearing masks, just to protect themselves from retaliation.
Yeah, that's unusual, huh?
It is.
Are you meaning to tell me they bought some balaclava masks to protest their own sheriff?
The situation inside this department I would describe as is very unusual.
So the whole world is watching now because of Nancy Guthrie. I mean, do you think all of these issues that you've described have had an impact on the investigation?
100%. 100%. The experience level inside our CID, like I said, they're hardworking people, but everybody needs mentors. And, you know, I cannot imagine starting as a new deputy or when I was in as a detective and not having mentors to help me out. You need that. They make you better. And when you have questions or when you have a high profile case, they're the ones that you want to go to. But from what I understand and what I'm being told, there's not a lot of that right now. Like I said, we're a very...
So I get the impression this guy hates Sheriff Nanos even more than Under Sheriff Rick does. So whatever has happened, he's pissed and he hates this guy.
Young department. 45% of our commissioned deputies and detectives have less than 5 years on. We're very young because of this turnover, and it's having a real impact. And when we need that expertise, that seniority the most during high profile incidents like this, they're simply not there. So I believe it is having an impact.
Couldn't the sheriff have said in the beginning, look, this is a complicated case, even
And again, this is maybe a strike on Brian here too, honestly, because he's the one feeding into all this, right? And I guess you could then say, well, Jared, isn't this a strike on you too? And I'd say maybe it is.
The FBI experts around the country have said, we've never even seen anything like this. I mean, they've never seen a kidnapping like this. Couldn't he have said, we're going to hand this over to the FBI because like this needs another level of expertise? I don't think that would have made him look bad. No, they could have still helped and assisted and been a part of it.
I agree. I think the right decision, and there's also different aspects of this as well. By deciding early to turn this over to the FBI and us take a supportive role to them, I think it would have been the best decision, in my opinion, for the Guthrie family, but also for our detectives and Pima County citizens. Like, from what I understand, the entirety of CID is being tasked with helping on this case. All of them. They still have other cases that aren't being worked as well as they could be. And the bad guys aren't giving us a break because we're working this case, hoping to find Nancy. The calls and the crimes are still coming in. They're still happening. So these cases are getting put on the back burner from what they otherwise would be.
So imagine you're Sheriff Nanos and you listen to this. You're like, what the fuck? This guy's saying what about me in front of 1 million people?
If this was turned over to the FBI, who could use their massive assets, resources, and personnel to work it with us in an assisting role, and then we could also then go back to a normal order of business to some extent and work some of these other cases that are happening in Pima County.
Yeah, that makes sense. Is there anything else I'm leaving out that you think is important that people should know? I mean, because again, you're in a unique role where you can speak.
Right.
And we have a hard time, getting information out.
Yes.
Because people will get in trouble.
Yes, and that fear is real. The fear is very real because they know what would happen. Again, I just want to reiterate that our detectives, they are busting their butt to try and solve this case and find Nancy and try and bring her home, hopefully safe to her family.
What do you want to bet that this guy's going to run for sheriff next? And this is like his stump speech.
They're putting in tons of hours and burning the candle at both ends. And so I just really like to take the opportunity to thank them for all their hard work. They're great guys. And we'd like to just convey to everybody that please don't hold us accountable for some of the decisions made by our leaders. We're trying.
Great. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Appreciate
Nice
your time very much.
Thank you.
I really appreciate Sergeant Cross for talking with me. And I'm going to stay in touch with him. And it's interesting kind of getting the backstory of what's been going on, according to him, at the sheriff's office. Because, I haven't covered like Pima County before. So I just kind of came in to cover Nancy Guthrie, and it's interesting how it's kind of opened the door and opened like a window into a look of what has been happening with the Pima County Sheriff's Office, what sounds like for years, at least according to many of the people who I've been talking to. So,
I mean, on one hand, this is part of Brian's job, right? You're trying to give people news and giving them a little bit of the gossip and drama that's going on. That's part of Brian's job. Now, that can sometimes conflict, though, right, with the ultimate purpose of finding Nancy. And that's what I talked about yesterday, right, where there could be two conflicting goals. The attention and what's good for your channel / your business is not always what's best for the actual case. And this is maybe an example of you seeing the conflicting interests.
Again, appreciate Sergeant Cross for talking with me. I'm going to stay obviously on the story. I'm not going anywhere. I'm hoping that things are starting to move. And there have been times since I've been here for the last 2 weeks that I felt like we were at a standstill. And there have been times that I felt like things were starting to move around. And I'm getting that feeling now that we may be getting closer to a resolution here. And the reason I say that is because of the SWAT raids. And again, the one on Friday night, there was a federal search warrant signed by a federal judge. They don't just sign those things without some kind of meat on the bones. So the fact that happened, and granted, I
don't necessarily agree with Ryan on that. Just like with Maureen and Ashleigh Banfield said, it would have to be a pretty weak probable cause for the federal judge in this case to not sign off on it. Brian saying, no, there has to be meat on the bone. And I would say, nah, it would have to be pretty weak for that federal judge to not approve it in this case with all the eyeballs on it, right? And if I'm the leader of this investigation, I would just hope the people under me are on the same team, right? Okay, let's have a unified front. If you have anything to say it to me behind closed doors, please, not in front of a million people. Thank you very much. That's what I would hope.
Clear all those people. They could clear that guy. I don't know. That seems like they cleared the guy near the Mexico border the other night, Carlos. So we'll see. But the totality of everything, that DNA coming in from inside Nancy's house and then DNA from the glove, and that's just what we know about. I can promise you there's probably so much that we don't know about that the FBI has and that the Pima County Sheriff's Office has. So my hope is that over the next couple of days, we're really going to see some movement here. And God, it would be amazing if Nancy Guthrie came home alive. And my heart goes out to her family, to Savannah Guthrie, and I'll just keep covering it. So appreciate you guys for following me, for subscribing, and I'll talk to you guys later.
All right. So that's the thing about that, though. I think I told you the other day, with each passing day, the percentage chance Nancy comes home alive gets less. I'd say we're down to 95.5 now. 95% she's gone, 5% she's not. And the only thing I'm hanging my hat on in the case is the DNA in the home. Just like CJ, I think that was her name, right? What is her name? CC Moore, not CJ. What am I talking about? CC Moore. So that's what I'd be hoping for in the case now at this point. But if that doesn't go anywhere, I think they're up the creek in a way. Now, someone was saying a glove was tied to the DNA in the home. I have not seen that anywhere yet. So people were saying that was on CNN or News Nation said it, but I haven't seen it yet. Yeah, so News Nation has Brian talking to that guy 3 hours ago, but that's it. So Tim was mentioning that, but I don't know where else he saw it. I haven't seen anything else about it yet. Absolutely, Jolly, it would be, but I don't know. Between all of the medicines that she needs and her age, it is just not looking good. But by the way, how many likes do we have out there? Is it close to 1,000 yet? Please remember to like the video while you're here and subscribe to the channel if you're not already. I think News Nation's actually kind of in the middle. Yeah, I mean, Bella, Savannah's been through the ringer. the last couple weeks. How many people are expecting that your 84-year-old mother is going to be kidnapped and then maybe murdered and then have it be the biggest case in America? I mean, that's wild. That's insane. 803, Bella. Oh my goodness. 197 more to go. Let's see if the Pima County Sheriff Department has anything to say about it. Nothing. Let's see if Brian Etten has anything to say about it. I just posted his video. Well, let's see. Who else could it even be? Megyn Kelly? Everyone loves Megyn Kelly here, right? Everyone's favorite anchor, Megyn Kelly? Yeah, no proof of life, Mizzy. I wouldn't spend a dime if not for that. No proof of life, no money. What happened? Did Charlie Kirk just come in the room, flicker in the lights? Yeah, looks like almost a lot of people taking the day off. Besides Brian, of course.
Hey guys, I wanted to give you a couple of...
Yeah, there's nothing. That's really it. That's really it, I guess, until tomorrow. I haven't heard anything about this DNA and glove. That would be interesting if so, and whatever glove it is it the one from a couple miles away? Tim, did you figure out where it was? Did you see it? The CNN thing? I haven't seen anything. Don't worry, Megyn Kelly didn't post anything. Yeah, I don't see it. I don't see it if so. But you already watched Savannah's video in the beginning. But all right, guys, that's about time to wrap it up. So again, remember to like the video here, subscribe to the channel, and I will most likely be back again live tomorrow night. I'm pretty much live every day at this point. And we talk about current events, true crime, and I use my experience with mental health, addiction, narcissistic abuse, being on the spectrum, and I apply it to those things. So thank you very much to everyone's in the chat, to all the mods, Jolly, Jimmy, Sarah, Big Cat, PJ. Yes, they did really find DNA in the house. The difference is it just wasn't from a glove. And what happened was there was a miscommunication. Perhaps an honest miscommunication, a comma in the wrong place. The Fox News people said, glove in the house. But Maureen said, no, it was just a miscommunication. But there is DNA in the house. And they think it's the touch DNA. But Cece there, she thinks they could find somebody from that. I would ask her then, well, do they know all the people that have been to and from the house? That's the next question to ask, right? Thank you, Bella. And that's right, Livin. You know it. Thank you, Mizzy. Yeah, let's all make sure. I do believe in the collective power of thought and energy and prayer. So everyone puts the good vibes out there for the best possible result. I mean, and what's the best possible result? The best possible result is she comes home alive. And honestly, at this point, that would be the biggest story of the year, of the last couple of years, honestly. Like, oh my goodness, she came alive. That would be humongous. I love you too, Beth. I love all the black sheep here. A great flock of black sheep. Yes, we will see, Bella. That's what Ashleigh Banfield was saying, although she might have just been speculating, right? She doesn't really know what kind it is. She's speculating it's the touch DNA. So that's all we can hope for. And they got to hope it's, and I didn't realize it was that way where the top 3 of those sites, they don't let you look. I didn't know that. I didn't know 23andMe and whatever the other ones are, they don't let you search their database. That's crazy. I wouldn't have thought that. But yep. So yeah, gone. Danielle, Kat, everyone else too. Till next time, get some rest. I gave you a shorter stream today. Shorter streams now are 2 hours and 53 minutes. Oh, and Eva, hi and bye to Eva as well. I didn't notice she was here. JW says the BBC is reporting DNA found in glove found 2 miles away is matching the DNA from house. All right, so maybe Tim was on to something with that. The BBC, huh? Let's see. Let's take a look. Is there a YouTube video about it? Is it on X? BBC breaking news? Doesn't look like it. I've yet to find this. Where are all my peeps? Well, we're reporting it right now, I guess, huh? Tina. Nancy Guthrie, gloves found with DNA appears to match suspect's glove in surveillance on Fox News. So this is their little trick, though, right? They're only posting it to TV. They're putting it on TV. But let's see. Fox 10 Phoenix? No. Well, I'm not going to sign off here until we get this breaking news out there. What's the name of the channel, Tina? Fox, just regular Fox News? Oh, there you go. There we go.
Chad Ayers served in law enforcement in both an undercover capacity and on SWAT teams, and he joins us now. Chad, first of all, thank you for your service in law enforcement. We'd appreciate your perspective because the video surveillance from Ms. Guthrie's front porch, it's obviously a critical component. It's the most we have, it seems, at least from those of us on the outside. But do we know exactly how this came about? Why wasn't it released sooner? What's your take on this as a law enforcement professional?
Well, Jason, I've been very careful because I'm not one to beat up on law enforcement, especially in a complex investigation like we have now. But it's been obvious from day one. I've said it since day one. I felt like the sheriff was in over his head just a little bit. And this sheriff doesn't need to be the king over this whole thing. The FBI comes in. They have tons of resources. Hopefully they're working together better than we've seen over the last week, and that we now know that they are going to submit these gloves to the FBI's lab, which...
That is not the video, Michelle. That is not the video that we're looking for, by the way. We already watched that video.
Is the best lab. Listen, I'm kind of hate to hear that they were sent down to Florida because too many, things can happen, chain of custody issue. There's all sorts of things. But now that they're getting back, once we get these gloves into CODIS and see if we have a DNA profile match, I think we're going to start to see things moving quicker and quicker.
I was stunned to learn that as they were doing the surveillance and looking out in the desert, they found 16 gloves. And then I read that a lot of these gloves were from law enforcement officials just tossing them out. What are they doing? Tossing gloves out into a potential crime scene and while they're seeking evidence, and then they find a glove that actually might be something that's relevant.
Well, this entire crime scene, how many times have we released the crime scene and had investigators come back? I mean, I have said this house, this residence.
All right. So maybe I was being too hopeful. So Big Cat says, okay, all they are saying is the glove visually matches the Foliage Man gloves. Nothing about DNA matches. Well, that's a big difference, isn't it? That's a big difference.
should have been roped off, taped off, secured until Nancy Guthrie is found dead or alive. And look, we are still holding on to hope that she is still out there. Obviously, we're in 2 weeks out from this thing. It doesn't look good personally. But again, the scene security on this, if we do apprehend a suspect, a defense attorney is going to have a heyday with this case, I'm afraid, because of the sloppiness that has been done.
But you see what they're doing, Tina? It's not saying a DNA match. The gloves found with DNA appears to match the gloves in surveillance, but that's not the same as a DNA match. But I'll see. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong.
And throughout this investigation, it's frustrating. I'm sure the American people are frustrated, not just the law enforcement personnel. And I get it. They're doing the best they can. A lot of times complex cases, Jason, do not move as fast as the American people want. The American viewers are invested in this case, I understand, but we have to trust the process. But I know that President Trump, Kash Patel have sent their best out there, and I am hoping and praying we get a resolution in the next 24 to 48 hours on this.
Yeah, well said. Everybody is praying for a conclusion. I want to ask you about that backpack because...
So here's the other thing. So Forbes has one too. Breaking. DNA from glove appearing to... I'll show you. Forbes breaking news. Look at this. DNA from glove appearing to match Nancy Guthrie kidnapping suspect. So what they're saying is it's the glove, but not a DNA match. I think that's what they're saying. Yeah, the glove, they're testing the glove that has DNA because it matches what they looked by sight to see in the camera footage. That's very different, right? So that's that. I thought there was more, but that's really what it is. That's what it is. They were clickbaiting people with that. I understand, Tina. They were doing that deceptively. But there's just, the way they were phrasing it was tricking people up. So what you have to look for is DNA match, not glove with DNA matches glove in video, right? That's a little different. Apparently, Jimmy, and it worked too, didn't it? It worked, but it's fine. We all make mistakes, right? And if I'm going to be a good shepherd of black sheep, I got to do my job better than Sheriff Nanos. Because here's the other thing you can say. I grant it, with that second guy that Brian Netton was interviewing today, I would never like that. Like, that's stepping out of line, out of turn. But you could also say, well, Sheriff Nanos is not doing a good job if he has so many people that have worked for him that are unhappy. You can say that too, right? It's like something's gone awry. Now, you can criticize how that guy is handling it, and perhaps you should criticize that because he's kind of embarrassing the whole investigation here. I think if I were to watch that video with Maureen, for example, I bet you Maureen would say the same thing. She'd be like, dude, this guy needs to shut up. Like, this guy needs to shut up and stop embarrassing the organization. Stop embarrassing the investigation. Stop embarrassing the family. Like, what the hell's wrong with you? So that's probably what Maureen would say. And I would know why she'd say it, because she'd be right. That guy should handle that kind of thing behind closed doors. But instead, nope, I'm going to blast this off. A 1,000,000-man smear campaign. That's what they call that. Undersheriff did the same thing. The 1,000,000-man smear campaign. Yes, not good. But that's how that guy rolls, though, right? He gave him the anonymous thing. Oh, by the way, everyone hates you. Instead of having the conversation. So again, you can say, well, maybe Sheriff Nanos could have handled that better too, which is maybe true. But instead, he said, "Oh, I'm going to take you off of midnights, and then you'll be able to see your family less." That's how I would have played it, Sarah. But again, this goes to show you there's egos, narcissistic tendencies, especially in these power and authority jobs. They just are. No breaking news, Jimmy. No breaking news. You'll be the boy or the boy who cried wolf. Now I get you, Christy. I can see both sides of it. I just don't think the second guy should have done that in public, probably. That would be my guess. That would be my take. Well, throughout this debacle, did we get closer to 1,000 likes? I've been hearing all sorts of things about Kash Patel. I've been hearing he's been flying women all around with government funds. Ah, 900. Got another 100 to go. It can be a while. We might not make it tonight. The other day I promised to be there until I hit 1,000. But I'm a little tired today. But we'll see. We'll see what happens overnight here. I have a feeling since today was an off day, they're going to try to put more news out there. Because here's the other thing too, right? The more they keep the story in the news, the more funds and the more resources they have available to solve the case. Because of what Trump said. Trump said, anything you need, it's for you. But if the case goes cold and gets out of the public's eye, they probably won't do that anymore. And you can say, well, that's not fair, that's not right. And you'd be right, but it could still be reality. So we'll see. We'll see. But all right, everybody. Have a great rest of your night here. Thanks for joining me. And I will see you all on the morrow. Yes or yes, they say.